My son-in-law left his briefcase behind on the driveway. I only wanted to move it out of the sun, but as I lifted it, the zipper burst and papers spilled everywhere. Then I saw it. The one thing I had been missing for 8 years. My body froze. I did not even think. I grabbed the document and ran inside. 10 minutes later, the police were knocking at my door. I am Raymond Bishop, 71 years old. For the last decade, I have been treated like a piece of furniture in my own home, a silent ghost in the hallway, a burden that needed to be fed and managed. But before I tell you how I brought an entire financial empire crashing down with a single piece of paper, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by someone who thought you were too old to fight back. The humid Atlanta air was already thick enough to choke on at 7 in the morning. I was kneeling in the garden pulling weeds from the petunias my wife Clara had planted before she passed. My knees cracked when I stood up, a painful reminder that I was not the man I used to be. Or at least, that is what Braden, my son-in-law, wanted me to believe. Move that piece of junk, Raymond. Braden's voice cut through the morning silence like a whip. He was standing on the front porch adjusting his silk tie. He looked polished, expensive, and completely hollow. He was shouting at me about my 1998 sedan, which was parked perfectly in the driveway. I said, "Move it." Braden barked again, checking his gold watch. "I have the investors meeting in 20 minutes and your eyesore is blocking the Escalade. Do not make me tell you twice or I will have it towed to the scrapyard myself." I wiped the dirt from my hands onto my trousers. I did not argue. I never argued anymore. Arguments required energy and I was saving mine. I slowly walked to my car, started the engine, which sputtered before roaring to life, and moved it onto the grass. It was humiliating, but humiliation was the rent I paid to live in the house I had paid for 30 years ago. Braden stormed past me, the smell of his expensive cologne overpowering the scent of the garden. He was on his phone screaming at some assistant. "Listen to me," he yelled into his headset. "I do not care if the SEC is asking questions. You stall them. You tell them the files are in transit. If you mess this up, you are fired. Do you hear me?" He threw his heavy leather briefcase onto the low retaining wall near the driveway so he could put on his driving gloves. He was frantic. Sweat was beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning waiting for him in his luxury SUV. Suddenly his phone beeped again. He cursed, grabbed his keys, and jumped into the Escalade. The engine roared and he backed out of the driveway with reckless speed, nearly clipping the mailbox. He sped down the street without looking back. He had forgotten the briefcase. It was sitting there on the wall, a $3,000 Italian leather bag that looked out of place against the mossy bricks. I stood there for a moment, watching the dust settle from his tires. My first instinct was to call him, to be the good father-in-law, to save him the trouble. But then I remembered the way he looked at me last night at dinner when I asked for a second helping of potatoes. He had rolled his eyes and pushed the bowl toward me like he was feeding a stray dog. I decided I would just put the bag inside the hallway. He would come back for it eventually. I walked over and lifted the handle. It was heavy, much heavier than it should have been for just papers. As I pulled it off the wall, the sound of tearing fabric ripped through the quiet morning. The zipper, strained to its limit, simply gave up. The bag burst open. It did not just open, it vomited its contents onto the concrete driveway. I expected files. I expected a laptop. What I saw made my heart hammer against my ribs. Bundles of cash, thick stacks of $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands tumbled out, bouncing on the pavement. There must have been $50,000 right there on the concrete. Beside the money were 3 watches that I knew cost more than my entire pension. But it was not the money that stopped my breath. It was the blue envelope. It slid out, last landing softly on top of a stack of cash. The world seemed to stop spinning. The birds stopped singing. The traffic noise from the highway faded into a dull buzz. I knew that envelope. I knew the specific shade of robin egg blue. I knew the texture of the paper because I had bought that stationery for Clara on our 40th anniversary. And I knew the handwriting on the front. To Raymond. My light. It was Clara's writing. Unmistakable. The loops of the R's, the way she crossed her T's with a slight upward slant. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick it up. Braden had told me this did not exist. 8 years ago, after the fire that took our home and took Clara from me, Braden had handled all the insurance claims. I was too broken, too lost in grief to look at the paperwork. He was the financial advisor, the expert. He had sat me down in this very house, held my hand, and looked me in the eye with tears in his own. He had said, "Raymond, I am so sorry. The insurance policy lapsed. Clara never signed the updated trust documents. There is no money, the house is gone, the savings are gone. But do not worry, Maya and I will take care of you. You will live with us. I had believed him. For 8 years I lived in their guest room, grateful for the scraps they threw me, thinking I was a pauper, thinking I was a burden on their finances. I opened the envelope. My fingers felt numb. Inside was a single document, not a photocopy, the original, the Bishop Family Trust. I scanned the pages with the eyes of the man I used to be. I was not just a gardener. I was a certified insurance appraiser for 40 years. I knew how to read a contract. I looked at the date next to Clara's signature. August 12th, 2 days before she died, 2 days before the fire. And then I saw the valuation. $2.5 million, plus a life insurance policy payout of $500,000, fully active with me named as the sole beneficiary. I felt a roar building in my chest. It started in my stomach, a hot, burning ball of rage. Braden had not just stolen my money. He had stolen my dignity. He had stolen my independence. Every time I had to ask him for $20 to buy medicine. Every time he sighed when he paid for my groceries. Every time he told guests at parties that he was a saint for taking in his broke father-in-law. It was all a lie. He was living in a house bought with my money, driving a car leased with my dividends, wearing suits tailored with my wife's legacy. I was not the charity case. I was the financier. I looked down at the cash scattered on the driveway. This was just walking around money for him, and he had probably generated it by laundering the very funds he stole from me. I quickly gathered the cash and shoved it back into the broken bag, but I kept the blue envelope. I folded it and put it inside my shirt right against my skin. It felt hot, like a brand. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I could not just confront him. He was a manipulator. He would destroy the evidence. He would claim I was senile. He would tell Maya I was hallucinating. I turned to go back inside, dragging the heavy bag. Then the landline phone in the kitchen started ringing through the open window. It rang with a shrill, demanding tone. I left the bag in the hallway and walked into the kitchen. I picked up the receiver. "Hello. Do not touch the bag, Raymond." It was Braden. His voice was not polished anymore. It was low, guttural, and terrifying. "I beg your pardon," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know you are standing in the hallway," he hissed. "I have a notification on my phone that the bag moved. It has a tracker. Listen to me very carefully, old man. If you opened that bag, if you touched anything inside it, especially a blue envelope, you will regret it for the rest of your short life." I felt a chill run down my spine. He knew. "I do not know what you are talking about, Braden," I lied. "I just moved it out of the sun." "You are a terrible liar, Ray. I am turning around. I will be there in 10 minutes. And if everything is not exactly where I left it, I am putting you in that state facility we visited last month. The one with the barred windows. Do you understand me?" He hung up. I stood there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. He was coming back, and he was dangerous. A man who steals millions from his own family is capable of anything. I looked at the clock. 10 minutes. I had to hide the envelope. But where? He would tear my room apart. He would strip search me. He had done it before, claiming he was looking for his lost cufflinks. I looked around the kitchen, the refrigerator, the pantry. No too obvious. Then I heard it. In the distance, but getting closer fast. Sirens. Not just one. A chorus of them. I walked to the front window and pulled back the curtain. Blue lights were flashing at the entrance of our subdivision. They were moving fast, screaming toward our house. My heart stopped. Had Braden called them? Had he told them I stole the bag? Was he framing me before he even got home? The first cruiser screeched to a halt right in front of my driveway, blocking the spot where Braden had been parked. Then a second one. Then a third. Officers were pouring out, hands on their holsters, looking at my front door. I looked down at the broken bag in the hallway, spilling cash onto the hardwood floor. I felt the blue envelope burning against my chest. I was trapped. If I opened the door, they would see the money. They would see a confused old man with a bag full of illicit cash. Braden would spin the story. He would say I stole it. He would say I was the criminal. Bam, bam, bam. The pounding on the door shook the entire frame. "Police, open up. We have a warrant." I took a deep breath. I realized then that Braden had not called them. He was afraid of the SEC. He was afraid of questions. These police were not here for me. Or were they? I looked at the blue envelope one last time, whispered a prayer to Clara, and reached for the doorknob. This was it. The moment everything changed. I opened the door. The wooden floorboards vibrated beneath my feet as the pounding on the front door continued. It was a rhythmic, authoritative thud that I had not heard since 1974 during a protest I attended in downtown Atlanta. Police. I had less than 10 seconds. I looked at the blue envelope in my hand. It was thin, unassuming, yet it held the weight of my entire past and the keys to my freedom. If I put it in my pocket, they would find it. If I slid it under the hallway rug, Braden would find it the moment the officers left. I needed a place that a man like Braden, a man obsessed with cleanliness and status, would never look. My eyes darted to the kitchen. Next to the back door stood the blue recycling bin. It was full of last week's junk mail, empty milk cartons, and the greasy cardboard box from the pizza Braden had ordered for himself while I ate leftovers. I moved as fast as my arthritic knees would allow. I shoved the blue envelope deep into the bin, pressing it flat against the side. I grabbed a stack of old newspapers, the Sunday sports section with the Falcons game results, and piled them on top. Then, for good measure, I dropped an empty juice container over the papers, the trash. To Braden, I was trash. So the trash was the safest place in the world. I straightened my shirt, wiped the sweat from my upper lip, and walked to the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my face was stone. I had practiced this face for 40 years in insurance meetings and boardrooms where I was the only black man at the table. I unlocked the deadbolt. The door swung open, revealing two police officers. One was young, with a high and tight haircut. The other was older, looking tired. Both had their hands resting near their holsters. Mr. Bishop, the older officer, asked. We received a 911 call about a disturbance. A potential burglary in progress involving a confused elderly male. A confused elderly male. The words stung like a slap. Braden had not just called them. He had set the narrative before he even arrived. Officer, I said, keeping my voice calm and low. I am Raymond Bishop. I live here. There is no burglary. Before the officer could respond, tires screeched in the driveway behind them. The black Escalade mounted the curb, crushing my hydrangeas. Braden leaped out of the car before it had even fully stopped rocking. He was running toward us, his tie flying over his shoulder, a look of sheer panic on his face. But it was a performance. I knew it. He knew it. Dad, Braden screamed, pushing past the officers to grab my shoulders. Oh, thank God you are safe. He shook me hard, his fingers digging into my collarbone. It looked like a hug to the police, but it was an assault. He was checking my pockets. He was feeling for the envelope. I am fine, Braden, I said, standing rigid. Officer, I am so sorry, Braden gasped, turning to the policeman with tears in his eyes. Real, actual tears. The man was a psychopath. My father. He has been struggling lately. His memory. He gets confused. He called me screaming that someone was stealing his things. I was terrified he might hurt himself or someone else. The young officer relaxed his stance, looking at Braden with sympathy. I understand, sir. It can be hard when they get to this age. I felt the heat rising in my neck. I was standing right there, yet they were talking about me as if I were a toddler or a stray dog. Is everything okay inside? Braden asked, his eyes darting past me to the hallway where the briefcase lay. I did not touch it, Braden, I said. Braden froze for a microsecond. He looked at me, and I saw the darkness behind his eyes. He pushed past me and ran into the hallway. Oh no, he muttered loudly for the benefit of the audience. He fell to his knees beside the open briefcase. I watched from the doorway. He ignored the stacks of cash. He ignored the expensive watches. His hands were frantically shuffling through the papers. He was looking for the blue tint. He was looking for the trust fund. He flipped the bag upside down. Nothing. He looked up at me. The panic on his face was real now. The mask slipped. For a second, he wasn't the concerned son-in-law. He was a desperate thief who had just realized he had been robbed. Where is it? He mouthed. No sound came out, but I read his lips perfectly. I stared back, blinking slowly. I kept my face blank. Braden stood up, his breathing shallow. He walked back to the door, composing himself. He could not tell the police that I had stolen a document proving he was an embezzler. He could not mention the trust fund because it was not supposed to exist. He was trapped in his own lie. Officer Braden said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. I think my father may have taken something else. My wallet. It was in the side pocket of the bag. It had $500 cash and my IDs. He was improvising. And he was dangerous. I did not take your wallet, Braden, I said firmly. Dad, please, Braden said, his voice dripping with fake condescension. Just give it back. We are not mad. You just get confused. You hide things. Remember last week when you hid the remote control in the freezer? I had never done that. He had done that to make me look crazy in front of Maya. Officer Braden continued, turning to the older policeman. Could you just check him? I do not want to press charges. He is family. I just need my ID back for a meeting. The older officer sighed and stepped toward me. Sir, do you mind emptying your pockets? I looked at Braden. He was smirking slightly. He thought he had me. He thought the envelope was in my jacket. I have nothing to hide, I said. I pulled out my pockets. A handkerchief, a packet of mints, my own wallet, old and worn leather containing $12, and a picture of Clara. Pat him down, Braden insisted. He hides things in his socks, in his waistband. The young officer stepped forward. Sir, turn around, please. This was the moment, the lowest moment of my life, standing on my own front porch with neighbors peering out from behind their curtains across the street. I turned around and spread my legs. I felt the officer's hands patting down my sides. He checked my ankles. He checked my waistband. He felt the lining of my jacket. Every touch was an insult. Every second was a lifetime of humiliation. I closed my eyes and thought of the recycling bin. I thought of the millions of dollars that rightfully belonged to me. I thought of the look on Braden's face when he realized he had lost. He is clean, the officer said, stepping back. Braden's jaw dropped. What? That is impossible. Check again. Sir, we checked him, the older officer said, his tone shifting. He doesn't have your wallet. Maybe you dropped it in the car. Braden looked like he was going to vomit. He looked at me, then at the recycling bin in the kitchen, then back at me. He knew I had it, but he couldn't tear the house apart in front of the police without looking like a lunatic. I must have misplaced it, Braden stammered. I am so sorry, officers. Thank you for coming. I will handle it from here. The officers nodded, tipping their caps to me, not out of respect but out of pity. Good luck, Mr. Bishop, the young one said. They walked back to their cars. Braden waited until the cruisers turned the corner. The moment they were out of sight, the atmosphere in the house shifted from a drama to a horror movie. He grabbed the front door and slammed it shut. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. He turned to me. The charming financial advisor was gone. In his place was a cornered animal. Give it to me, he hissed. I walked past him, heading toward the kitchen. My legs were shaking, but I forced them to move steadily. I poured myself a glass of water from the tap. I do not know what you are talking about, I said, taking a sip. Braden marched into the kitchen. He grabbed the glass from my hand and smashed it into the sink. Shards of glass flew everywhere. Do not play games with me, old man, he screamed, his face inches from mine. I saw the blue envelope. I know you saw it. You have no idea who you are messing with. That document is nothing but paper if you don't have the power to enforce it. And you have no power. You have no money. You have no lawyer. You are nobody. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the sweat on his upper lip. I saw the fear behind the aggression. You are right, Braden, I said softly. I am nobody, just a confused old man who puts remote controls in the freezer. I turned and walked toward the basement door, my designated living area. If I find out you have it, Braden whispered behind me, his voice low and deadly. If you try to show it to Maya, I will put you in a home so terrible you will beg for death. I stopped. I did not turn around. Dinner is at 6, Braden. Do not be late. I walked down the stairs to the basement. I closed the door and locked it. My heart was still racing, but for the first time in 8 years, it wasn't racing from fear. It was racing from adrenaline. I sat on my narrow cot and looked at the recycling bin I had brought down with me earlier that week for my own trash. No, wait. The envelope was still upstairs. I froze. I had left the envelope in the kitchen recycling bin. Upstairs, in Braden's territory. I had to get it back before he took out the trash. Tonight was garbage night, and Braden was standing right there in the kitchen. The smell of garlic and basil filled the kitchen, but to me, it smelled like sulfur. Braden was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of marinara sauce, whistling a cheerful tune as if he hadn't just threatened to destroy my life 5 minutes ago. I sat at the small breakfast table, my hands gripping a mug of cold tea, watching the blue recycling bin in the corner. It was right there, 3 feet away from Braden's Italian leather loafers. The blue envelope was buried under yesterday's newspaper and an empty carton of orange juice. If he decided to take the trash out before Maya came home, everything would be over. I looked at his back, at the way his shoulders moved with that arrogant confidence, and suddenly I was transported back 8 years. It was the day after Clara's funeral. The house still smelled of lilies and sympathy casseroles. I was sitting in this very kitchen, staring at a wall, feeling like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I wanted was to crawl into bed and never wake up. And there was Braden. He had walked in with a stack of papers and a sad smile. He put a pen in my hand. "Sign here, Ray," he had said, his voice soft and soothing. "It is just standard procedure. We need to close the accounts before the bank freezes them. Do not worry about reading the fine print. I have taken care of everything. You know I used to work in compliance. I would never let anything happen to you." I had signed. God help me, I had signed everything. I signed away the house. I signed away the insurance. I signed away my autonomy. I was grieving, and he saw an opportunity. He was a vulture circling a wounded animal, waiting for the moment I was too weak to fight back. Now, 8 years later, he was chopping parsley with the same hands that had stolen my legacy. The sound of the garage door opening snapped me back to the present. Maya, my daughter, was home. Braden immediately stopped whistling. He put down the knife and turned to me, his face transformed instantly. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a look of deep, exhausted concern. He ran his hand through his hair, messing it up slightly to look stressed. "Showtime." Maya walked into the kitchen, dropping her purse on the counter. She looked tired. Her eyes were puffy, and there was a slump in her shoulders that broke my heart. She worked 12 hours a day as a nurse, taking care of strangers, while her husband spent her inheritance on watches and mistresses. "Hey, beautiful," Braden said, walking over to kiss her cheek. "How was the hospital?" Maya sighed, leaning into him. "Terrible. We lost a patient in the ICU. I just want to sit down." She looked at me and forced a smile. "Hi, Daddy. How was your day?" Before I could answer, Braden jumped in. "It was eventful," he said, looking down at the floor. Maya pulled back, looking at him. "What do you mean? Is everything okay?" Braden sighed, a heavy, dramatic sound. He walked over to the sink and pointed at the shards of glass he had smashed earlier. He hadn't cleaned them up. He had left them there as a prop. "Dad had a bit of an episode today, honey." I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "That is a lie," I said, my voice trembling with rage. Maya looked at the broken glass, then at me. "Daddy, what happened? Did you drop a glass?" "It's okay. Accidents happen." "It wasn't an accident," Maya, Braden said softly, walking over to put a hand on her shoulder. "He didn't drop it. He threw it. He was screaming about people stealing his money, about the police." I looked at Maya, begging her with my eyes to see the truth. "Maya, listen to me. He is lying. He came home early because he forgot his briefcase. It fell open. There was money inside, Maya, thousands of dollars in cash, and a letter from your mother." Braden shook his head, looking at Maya with pity. "See, this is what I was telling you on the phone. The paranoia is getting worse." "There was no money, Dad," Maya said, gently, walking toward me like I was a frightened animal. "Braden works in finance. He doesn't carry cash." I saw the envelope, I shouted, pointing at the recycling bin. I almost gave it away right then. "It is the trust fund, Maya. The Bishop Family Trust. Your mother left us millions. He stole it." The room went silent. Maya froze. She looked at Braden. Braden didn't get angry. He didn't yell. He did something much more sinister. He laughed. A sad, heartbroken little laugh. "Oh, Ray," Braden said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "We talked about this. There is no trust fund. Clara didn't sign the papers. Remember? You were there. We looked for them together." He turned to Maya, taking her hands. "Honey, I didn't want to worry you, but the neighbors called me today. They said Ray was outside this morning yelling at the mailman. He thought the mailman was a government spy." I gasped. "I never did that. And then the police came." Braden continued relentlessly. "He called the police on himself. Maya, he told them there was a burglar. When they got here, he didn't know who they were. It was It was terrifying. I had to rush home from work. I felt the walls closing in. He was weaving a web of lies so tight, so detailed that the truth sounded like madness. He was using my age against me. He was using my grief against me. Maya looked at me, and for the first time I saw it, the look I had dreaded more than death. Pity. She didn't see her father. She didn't see the man who taught her to ride a bike, the man who worked double shifts to pay for her nursing school. She saw a senile old man losing his grip on reality. "Daddy," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "You called the police." "I called no one." I slammed my hand on the table. "He is gaslighting you, Maya. Can't you see it? He is the one lying. Check the bin. Just check the recycling bin." Braden stepped in front of the bin, blocking it casually. "Ray, stop it," Braden said, his voice firm but gentle. "You are scaring her." He turned to Maya. "Honey, I think it is time. We can't keep doing this alone. It is not safe. What if he leaves the stove on? What if he wanders out into traffic? I found a brochure for that place in Stone Mountain, Sunny Hill. It has 24-hour care." "No," Maya said, wiping her eyes. "I promised Mom I would take care of him." "You are taking care of him," Braden insisted, "by getting him the help he needs. He is hallucinating millions of dollars. He is aggressive. Look at the glass in the sink, Maya. He could have hurt you." I sank back into my chair. I felt small. I felt invisible. The more I fought, the crazier I looked. That is the genius of his cruelty. If I yelled, I was aggressive. If I cried, I was unstable. If I stayed silent, I was compliant. Maya walked over to me and knelt down. She took my rough hand in hers. "Daddy," she said softly, "do you know what year it is?" I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. She was terrified of losing me to a disease I didn't have. "It is 2024, Maya," I said clearly, "and your husband is a thief." Maya stood up sighing. She looked defeated. Maybe we should see Dr. Evans," she said to Braden, "just for a checkup, to see if it is starting." Braden nodded solemnly. "I think that is best, for everyone's safety." He walked back to the stove and turned off the burner. "Why don't you go upstairs and change, honey?" Braden said. "I will clean up this mess. I will take out the trash and set the table." My blood ran cold. "I will take out the trash." He was going to empty the bin. He was going to throw away the blue envelope, the only proof I had. I stood up. My knees popped, but I ignored the pain. "No," I said. Both of them looked at me. I will do it," I stammered. I broke the glass. "I should clean it up." "Dad, sit down," Braden said, his eyes narrowing. "You are tired. I need to be useful," I snapped. "Please, Maya, let me do this. If I am losing my mind, let me at least clean up my own mess. Let me have some dignity." I played the pity card. It was the only weapon I had left. Maya looked at Braden. "Let him do it, Braden, if it makes him feel better." Braden hesitated. He looked at the bin, then at me. He was calculating. If he stopped me, he might look controlling. And why would he suspect anything? He thought I was crazy. He thought I was confused. He didn't know I had hidden the envelope in there. He thought I was just an old man trying to be helpful. "Fine," Braden said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Just be careful, Ray. Don't cut yourself." I walked to the sink. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from adrenaline. I swept the glass into the dustpan. Then I walked to the recycling bin. I picked it up. It was light, but it felt like I was carrying gold. "I am going to take this to the curb," I said. I walked toward the back door. I could feel Braden's eyes boring into my back. "Don't wander off," Ray Braden called out. I stepped out into the cool evening air. The door clicked shut behind me. I walked to the large rolling bin at the side of the house. But I didn't dump the recycling. I reached down under the newspaper and the juice carton. My fingers brushed against the cool, smooth paper of the envelope. I pulled it out. I looked at the house. Through the kitchen window, I could see Braden hugging Maya, rubbing her back, comforting her. He looked like the perfect husband. I slid the envelope into the waistband of my trousers, covering it with my shirt. "You think you have won, Braden," I whispered to the night air. "You think I am just a confused old man." I walked back toward the house. But I wasn't confused. And I wasn't done. Tomorrow Braden was going to learn that even a flickering candle can burn down a mansion. The next morning, the kitchen smelled of burnt toast and impending doom. I walked in my joints, stiff from a night spent lying awake on the cot in the basement. My back ached, but my mind was sharper than it had been in a decade. Braden was already sitting at the head of the table. He was wearing a navy blue suit that probably cost more than my first car. He was reading the Wall Street Journal and sipping an espresso. Maya was gone. Her shift at the hospital started at 6. It was just the two of us, two men, one a predator and the other his prey. "Sit down," Ray Braden said without looking up from his paper. I pulled out my chair slowly, letting it scrape against the floor. I sat down. That was when I saw it. Right there on my placemat where my plate of scrambled eggs should have been was a glossy tri-fold brochure. The colors were muted pastels, pale yellow and soft green. Sunny Hill Extended Care Facility. I stared at the picture on the cover. It showed an elderly woman in a wheelchair looking out a window at a parking lot. They had tried to make it look peaceful, but I knew what Sunny Hill was. It was a state-funded warehouse for the forgotten. It was where families sent their elderly relatives when the money ran out or when they just wanted them to stop existing. It smelled of bleach and urine and despair. I reached out a trembling hand to touch it. Braden finally lowered his newspaper. He folded it precisely and placed it next to his coffee cup. He looked at me with eyes that were as cold and dead as a shark's. "I made some calls this morning, Ray," he said casually as if discussing the weather. "They have a bed open in the memory care unit. It is a shared room, 4 beds to a room, but beggars cannot be choosers, right?" I looked up at him. I let my lower lip quiver. I hunched my shoulders, making myself look smaller. "Braden, please," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Not Sunny Hill. I have heard stories about that place. People die there." Braden smiled. It was a slow, cruel spreading of his lips. "People die everywhere, Ray. But people like you, people who steal from their family, people who lose their grip on reality, they tend to die faster in places like that. The staff there is overworked. Sometimes they forget to bring meals. Sometimes they forget to change the sheets. Sometimes if a patient is too loud or too difficult, they sedate them so heavily they sleep for 3 days straight." He leaned forward across the table. The smell of his expensive cologne wafted over me, mixing with the scent of my own fear. "I do not want to go there," I said, letting a tear slip down my cheek. It was a real tear, but it was not from fear. It was from the memory of the man I used to be, and the rage of having to play this pathetic role. "Then give me the file," Braden hissed. His voice dropped to a whisper, a venomous sound that seemed to vibrate in the air between us. "You think you are clever, Ray. You think hiding that envelope gives you leverage. It gives you nothing. I am Maya's husband. But more importantly, I have the paperwork. I have the power of attorney." I shook my head. No, you do not. I never signed that." Braden laughed softly. "Oh, Ray, you signed so many things after Clara died. You were so grief-stricken, so eager to let me handle the burden. Do you even know what you signed? I have full medical and financial guardianship over you. And I have influence over Maya." He stood up and walked around the table until he was standing right behind my chair. He placed his hands on my shoulders. His grip was tight, painful. "Listen to me, old man," he whispered into my ear. "If that blue envelope is not on this table when I get home from work at 5 o'clock, I am calling the orderlies from Sunny Hill. I will tell them you became violent. I will tell them you attacked Maya. I will have you sedated and strapped to a gurney before the sun goes down. And once you are in that system, once you are labeled as a dementia patient with a history of violence, no one will ever listen to you again. You can scream about trust funds and millions of dollars all you want. They will just up your dosage." I shuddered under his hands. I let out a small whimper. "Please, Braden," I begged. "Just let me stay in the basement. I won't say anything." 5 o'clock. Ray Braden said, releasing my shoulders. He patted my cheek twice, hard enough to sting. "Enjoy your breakfast. It might be the last real food you eat for a long time." He grabbed his briefcase, the new one he had bought yesterday, to replace the one I had broken, and marched out the door. I sat there frozen until I heard the heavy thud of the front door closing. I heard the beep of the alarm system engaging. I heard the roar of the Escalade's engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. I waited 2 full minutes. Then I stood up. I stopped shaking. I straightened my back. I wiped the single tear from my cheek with the back of my hand. I walked to the window and watched his car disappear around the bend of the cul-de-sac. He thought he had broken me. He thought the threat of Sunny Hill would paralyze me, but he had made a fatal mistake. He had forgotten that a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous man on earth. I did not have until 5 o'clock. I had maybe 2 hours before he checked the security cameras remotely. I ran to the basement. I didn't hobble. I ran. I went to the loose brick behind the water heater. I pulled it out. Behind it was a small waterproof bag. Inside was not money. It was something more valuable. My old Samsung Galaxy S7. The screen was cracked and the battery was almost dead, but it worked. I had charged it secretly at night using the outlet behind the washing machine. I turned it on. 7% battery. Enough. I opened the gallery. There they were. 12 high-resolution photographs. Yesterday, while Braden was screaming at the police outside, I hadn't just put the envelope in the trash. Before that, in the 30 seconds I had while the sirens were approaching, I had taken the documents out, laid them on the kitchen counter, and snapped pictures of every single page. The trust deed, the account numbers, the signatures, the fraudulent transfers Braden had made. I had put the physical papers in the trash as a decoy. I knew he would eventually find them or destroy them. I needed insurance. I shoved the phone into my pocket. I grabbed my windbreaker and a baseball cap. I went to the back door. Braden had set the alarm. If I opened the door, the siren would blare and he would get a notification on his phone. But I was an electrician. I had wired this house 30 years ago. Braden had updated the keypad, but the underlying circuit was the same. I went to the utility closet in the hallway. I found the panel. I didn't cut the power that would alert him too. Instead, I located the zone wire for the back door sensor. I stripped a small piece of copper wire from an old lamp cord and created a jumper bridge across the terminals. The system now thought the door was permanently closed, even if I opened it. I slipped out the back door into the humid morning air. I couldn't take my car. He would notice it missing. I had to walk. The post office was 3 miles away, a 40-minute walk for a young man. For me, with my bad hip and the Georgia heat rising, it was a marathon. I stuck to the tree line, moving through the neighbors' yards, avoiding the security cameras that littered our upscale suburban neighborhood. I felt like a fugitive in my own community. Every car that passed made me jump. Was it him? Had he turned around? My hip was screaming by the time I reached the main road. Sweat was pouring down my back, soaking my shirt. I was breathing hard, my heart fluttering in my chest like a trapped moth. I kept seeing the brochure for Sunny Hill in my mind, the empty eyes of the woman in the wheelchair. I walked faster. I reached the strip mall where the post office was located. It sat between a nail salon and a liquor store. I pulled my cap down low. I pushed through the glass doors. The air conditioning hit me like a physical blow, instantly cooling the sweat on my face. I walked to the self-service kiosk. I didn't want to talk to a person. I didn't want witnesses. I pulled the phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking again, but this time from exhaustion. I connected the phone to the photo printing machine. Select photos. Select all. Print. The machine whirred. It took forever. Each second stretched into an hour. I looked at the door, expecting Braden to burst in at any moment. Finally, the photos slid out. Clear, sharp, damning. I bought a large padded envelope. I bought stamps. I wrote the address with a shaky hand, but the name was clear. Elias Vance. Elias was the only man I trusted. We had served in the 82nd Airborne together 50 years ago. He had saved my life in the jungle, and I had saved his. After the war, he had become a private investigator. He was retired now, living in a cabin in North Carolina off the grid, but he still had contacts. He still knew how to bury a body or dig one up. I stuffed the photos into the envelope. I licked the seal. I walked to the drop box. I held the envelope over the slot. This was it. Once I dropped this, there was no going back. If Braden found out, he would make good on his threat. He would destroy me. But if I didn't drop it, he would destroy me anyway. I thought of Clara. I thought of the way she looked at me before she died. She trusted me to protect our family. I had failed her for 8 years. Not anymore. I let go. The envelope slid into the darkness of the box with a soft thud. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I turned around and walked out into the blinding sun. My legs were weak, but my soul felt lighter than air. Now I just had to get back home, reset the alarm wiring, and pretend to be a terrified old man waiting for his executioner. I checked the time. 9:15. Braden wouldn't be home for hours. But as I turned the corner onto my street, a black sedan slowed down next to me. The window rolled down. It wasn't Braden. It was a man I had never seen before. He was wearing sunglasses and a thick gold chain. "Mr. Bishop," he asked. His voice was smooth like oil on pavement. I froze. "Your son-in-law asked me to check on you. He saw on the cameras that you weren't in the house. Get in the car, Raymond. We are going for a ride." I looked at the car. I looked at the empty street. I had bypassed the door sensor, but I had forgotten the motion detectors in the hallway. Braden knew. I looked at the man. I gripped my cane. "I am not going anywhere with you," I said. The man smiled. "I don't think you have a choice. Sunny Hill is expecting you early." He opened the car door. I looked back toward the post office. The package was gone. The fuse was lit. If I was going down, I was going to make sure the explosion took them all with me. The Checkerboard Diner was the kind of place Braden would never set foot in. It smelled of burnt coffee, stale grease, and 50 years of cigarette smoke that had seeped into the vinyl booths. It was located on the south side of the city, far away from the manicured lawns and security gates of my neighborhood. I sat in the back booth, my back to the wall, watching the door. My hands were wrapped around a ceramic mug that had a chip in the rim. I was still shaking, but not from the cold. I was shaking from the adrenaline of my escape. When that man in the black sedan had tried to grab me outside the post office, I did the only thing a 71-year-old man could do. I didn't fight him. I didn't run. I simply fell. I collapsed right there on the sidewalk, clutching my chest and screaming for help. A crowd gathered instantly. Phones came out. The man in the black car, realizing he was about to be the star of a viral video involving an elderly victim, had sped off. I had taken 3 different buses to get here, doubling back twice, just like they taught us in basic training. The bell above the door chimed. A man walked in. He moved with a limp, leaning heavily on a cane carved from hickory. He wore a faded army jacket and a hat pulled low over his eyes. Elias Vance. We had served together in the 82nd Airborne, jumping out of perfectly good airplanes into jungles that wanted to kill us. After the war, we spent 30 years working in the fraud department of National General Insurance. I was the appraiser. Elias was the investigator. I looked at the damage. Elias looked at the lies. He saw me and nodded. He shuffled over and slid into the booth opposite me. He looked older than I remembered. His skin was like crumpled parchment and his hands were spotted with age. But when he looked up, his eyes were the same. Sharp, clear, dangerous. "You look like hell," Ray Elias grunted, signaling the waitress for coffee. "I feel like hell," I replied. "Did you get the package?" Elias tapped the breast pocket of his jacket. "It is right here. I picked it up from the P.O. box an hour ago. I have been sitting in my car looking at it ever since." He waited until the waitress poured his coffee and walked away. Then he leaned in close, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "Ray, tell me exactly what you think you found." I took a deep breath. "I found a trust fund document, Elias. Clara left me $2.5 million. Braden hid it. He has been living off it." Elias stared at me for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out the photos I had taken. He spread them out on the sticky table, covering them with his hands so no one else could see. He pointed to a string of numbers at the bottom of the second page. "You were always a good appraiser," Ray Elias said softly. "You could spot water damage painted over with fresh latex from a mile away, but you never had the stomach for the deep dirt. That is why you stayed in appraisal and I went into special investigations." He tapped the paper with a yellow fingernail. "This is not just a trust fund, Ray. This is a shell game." I frowned, leaning closer. "What do you mean?" Elias pulled out a pen and circled the routing number. "Look at this bank," he said. "First Nevis International. That is an offshore holding bank in the Caribbean. Now look at the beneficiary. It does not say Raymond Bishop directly. It says the Clara Bishop Revocable Trust, care of BW Holdings." "BW," I whispered. "Braden, Washington." Elias nodded grimly. "Exactly. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. I ran these numbers through the old database. I still have access. Don't ask me how." He pulled another piece of paper from his pocket. It was a computer printout filled with dense rows of data. "I found 6 other companies registered to BW Holdings," Elias said. "Blue Heron Properties, CB Estates, Bishop Ventures." My blood ran cold. CB Estates. Clara Bishop. "He is using her name," I choked out. "He is using both your names," Elias said, his voice hard. I pulled the credit reports, Ray. According to the system, you and Clara own 14 rental properties in 3 different states. They are all heavily mortgaged. The loans were taken out using the trust fund as collateral. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to spin. I don't understand. Why money laundering? Elias said, taking a sip of his black coffee. Braden isn't just stealing your money. He is washing dirty money for someone else. He takes cash, illicit cash, buys these properties under your name, renovates them on paper with inflated costs, and then sells them or rents them out. The money comes back clean and he skims the cream off the top. I sat back stunned. I thought he was just a greedy son-in-law. I thought he just wanted to buy fancy cars. It is worse than that, Elias continued. I looked into the investors for these properties. Ray, these aren't regular banks. These are private equity firms with ties to some very bad people. We are talking about organized crime syndicates that use real estate to clean drug money. I felt like I was going to be sick. My daughter, Maya, she is living in that house. Does she know? Elias asked. No, I said quickly. She thinks he is a genius financial advisor. She thinks I am senile. Elias rubbed his chin, the stubble rasping against his hand. That is his safety valve. If the feds ever come knocking, who is on the deed? You. Who is the beneficiary of the trust? You. Who has a documented history of dementia and confusion? You. I slammed my fist softly on the table. He is setting me up to be the fall guy. Bingo, Elias said. If this house of cards collapses, Braden claims he was just trying to manage the complex estate of his mentally declining father-in-law. He claims you signed everything in moments of confusion. He walks away with the cash and you go to federal prison for fraud. At 71 years old, that is a life sentence. I looked at the photos of the documents. My wife's signature was there. He had forged it on the newer loans, I was sure of it. Or maybe he had tricked her before she died. What do I do, Elias? I asked, my voice trembling. I can't go to the police. The local cops are his friends. He plays golf with the precinct captain. Elias reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. You listen to me, Ray. You cannot go home. I have to, I said. Maya is there. If you go back to that house, you are going to have an accident, Elias said, his eyes locking onto mine. I have seen this before. A fall down the stairs, a gas leak in the basement, an overdose of sleeping pills. Braden is cornered. He knows you saw the envelope. He knows the timeline is collapsing. He cannot risk you talking. He is not a killer, I said, though I didn't believe it myself. He is a desperate man who owes money to cartels, Elias countered. He doesn't have to be a killer. He just has to be desperate enough to open a door or leave a gas valve on. I pulled my hand away. I can't leave Maya. If I run, he wins. If I run, he drains the accounts and disappears with my daughter. I need to stop him. Elias sighed, leaning back in the booth. You always were stubborn, even in the jungle. You refused to leave that wounded kid behind. I didn't leave you then, and I am not leaving my daughter now, I said. Elias cracked a dry smile. I knew you would say that. That is why I brought this. He reached into a canvas bag at his feet and pulled out a small black device. It looked like a pager from the 90s. It is a wandering recorder, Elias explained. High fidelity. Battery lasts for 48 hours. It transmits to a cloud server in real time. Tape it to your chest. Under your shirt. He slid it across the table. And this, he added, sliding a business card over. I picked it up. It was blank except for a phone number. That is a lawyer I know in D.C., Elias said. She is not cheap and she is not nice. But she hates fraud and she hates bullies. I already sent her the scans. She is drafting a motion to freeze the assets. But she needs proof of intent. She needs a confession or something close to it. I have to get him to admit it. I realized. You have to get him to admit that you are not crazy and that he is the one pulling the strings, Elias said. And you have to do it without getting killed. I took the recorder and the card. I felt a surge of strength. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was an operative. One more thing, Elias said, his face growing serious again. What Braden isn't working alone legally either. I saw the notary stamps on these deeds. They are all from the same guy, a lawyer named Julian Thorne. I know him, I said. He comes to the house for dinner. He is Braden's college buddy. He is also a disbarred attorney practicing under a shell firm, Elias said. If Braden goes down, Thorne goes down. They will protect each other. You are walking into a nest of vipers, Ray. I stood up, putting the recorder in my pocket. I have spent the last 8 years living in a basement, Elias. I have been invisible. I have been treated like a ghost. Ghosts are good at haunting people. Elias nodded. He raised his coffee cup in a toast. Give them hell, Ray, and watch your back. If I don't hear from you by noon tomorrow, I am coming in, and I am bringing my old service pistol. I smiled for the first time in days. Thanks, brother. I walked out of the diner and into the rain. The sky was dark, reflecting the storm that was brewing inside my family. I was going back to the house. I was going back to the trap. But this time I wasn't the bait. I was the hunter. I hailed a cab. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. Where to, he asked. I gave him the address. The address of the house I paid for. The house where my wife died. The house where my enemy slept. Take me home, I said. I have a son-in-law to deal with. As the cab pulled away, I taped the recorder to my chest. The cold plastic against my skin felt like armor. Braden wanted a war. He was about to find out that you never, ever declare war on a man who has nothing left to lose. The house smelled of roasted duck and expensive perfume, a cloying mixture that made my stomach turn. Below the surface scents lay the metallic tang of greed. Tonight was Braden's big night. He called it an exclusive investment opportunity gala, but I knew what it really was. It was a feeding frenzy. And I was the bait. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest bathroom looking at a stranger. Braden had come into my room an hour ago and stripped the navy blue suit I had laid out on the bed. He had thrown it into the back of the closet and handed me a pile of clothes that smelled like mothballs. Put these on, Ray, he had said with a smirk. You need to look comfortable. We don't want you looking stiff. So there I was, wearing a beige cardigan with a small hole in the left elbow and trousers that were 2 inches too short, exposing my mismatched socks. I looked frail. I looked neglected. I looked exactly like the senile burden Braden needed me to be. I adjusted the collar of the shirt. Underneath the fabric, the small black recorder Elias had given me was taped securely to my chest. It was warm against my skin, a secret heartbeat thumping in rhythm with my own. I walked out into the hallway. The living room was packed. There were about 30 people, mostly older couples, the kind who had worked hard all their lives and were looking for a safe place to park their retirement savings. They held crystal flutes of champagne, listening raptly as Braden held court by the fireplace. He looked magnificent, I had to give him that. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. His smile was dazzling, projecting confidence and stability. And here is the man of the hour, Braden announced, his voice booming as he spotted me. Ladies and gentlemen, my father-in-law, Raymond. The room fell silent. 30 pairs of eyes turned to look at the old man in the moth-eaten sweater. I saw pity in their gazes. I saw relief that they were not me. Come here, Ray Braden said, walking over and wrapping an arm around my shoulder. He squeezed hard, his fingers digging into my trapezius muscle, a silent warning to behave. I want you all to meet the reason I work so hard. Braden addressed the crowd, his voice dropping to a tender, reverent tone. When my wife's mother passed, Ray here had a hard time. The confusion set in pretty quickly. The doctors say it is progressive. It is not easy managing a complex estate while providing 24-hour care, but family is everything, isn't it? A collective murmur of agreement rippled through the room. You are a saint, Braden, a woman in pearls said, dabbing at her eye. Most people would have put him in a home. We could never do that, Braden said, looking at me with fake adoration. Even if he doesn't always remember who I am, even if he gets aggressive, sometimes he is still family. And that is why I started the Bishop Reverence Fund, to ensure that families can protect their assets even when life throws these tragic curveballs. I felt the bile rising in my throat. He was using my alleged dementia as a marketing tool. He was selling trust. Look at me, the good son-in-law, taking care of the broken old man. Trust me with your money. I stood there silent, letting him paint his masterpiece of lies. I offered a weak, trembling smile. I played the part. Can I get a glass of water? I asked, making my voice sound thin and reedy. Of course, Ray Braden said. Why don't you go into the study? It is quieter in there. I will have the caterer bring you something. He steered me toward the study and gently pushed me inside, closing the heavy oak doors behind me. The noise of the party instantly muffled. I was alone. I didn't sit down. I moved instantly. The study was Braden's sanctuary. It was where he kept the shredder, the safe, and the private phone line. I walked over to the desk. It was locked. I checked the safe behind the painting. Locked. Then the door handle turned. I threw myself into the large leather armchair in the corner, grabbed a magazine, and held it upside down. Braden walked in. He wasn't alone. He was on his cell phone, and he looked agitated. He didn't even look at me. To him, I was just a piece of furniture. He walked to the window, his back to me, and lowered his voice. "Listen to me, Jessica," he hissed into the phone. "I don't care about the flight transfer. Just make sure the accounts in the Caymans are ready to receive the wire." I stopped breathing. The recorder on my chest was running. Jessica. That wasn't his assistant. That was the woman I had seen him with at lunch 3 months ago. The woman he claimed was a real estate agent. Yes, tonight is the night. Braden continued pacing the room. I have $3 million in commitments from these idiots in the living room. Once the checks clear on Monday, I am initiating the transfer. We are liquidating everything. The house, the cars, the portfolio. He paused, listening to the person on the other end. "No." He laughed, a cruel, cold sound. "Maya isn't coming." "Are you crazy?" "She is dead weight. She will just cry and ask questions. I am leaving her the house debt. She can deal with the foreclosure." My hands gripped the armrests of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. He was planning to abandon my daughter. He was going to steal everything, leave her with millions in debt, and run off to Mexico with his mistress. "And the old man?" Braden asked, glancing over his shoulder at me. I stared blankly at the page of the upside-down magazine, letting my mouth hang open slightly. "He is not a problem," Braden said, turning back to the window. "I am putting him in Sunny Hill tomorrow morning. I already signed the papers. Once he is in the system, he is gone. By the time anyone realizes the money is missing, we will be sipping margaritas in Cabo. 2 weeks, baby. Just hold on for 2 weeks." He hung up the phone. He took a deep breath, adjusted his tie in the reflection of the window, and put his charming mask back on. He turned and looked at me. "You doing okay there, Ray?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Try not to drool on the leather. It is imported." He walked out, leaving the door slightly ajar. I sat there, my heart pounding against the recorder. I had it. I had the confession. I had the plan. But I also had a timeline. 2 weeks, no. He said he was putting me in the home tomorrow. Monday was the wire transfer. I didn't have 2 weeks. I had hours. I needed to get out of the room. The air was suffocating me. I pushed myself up and walked out into the hallway. I needed to find a quiet place to upload the audio file to the cloud, just as Elias had taught me. I headed toward the back of the house, toward the kitchen. As I passed the hallway leading to the bedrooms, I saw my grandson, Leo. He was 10 years old, sitting on the bottom step of the staircase, playing a game on his tablet. He was wearing a miniature tuxedo, looking like a tiny, uncomfortable version of his father. "Leo," I said softly. He looked up. His eyes were wide and innocent, reflecting the blue light of the screen. "Hi, Grandpa," he said. "Are you hiding from the party too?" I asked, sitting down on the step next to him. "Yeah," Leo said, shrugging. "It is boring. And Dad said I can't eat the duck because it is for the guests." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a wrapped peppermint candy. "Here," I whispered. "Don't tell your dad." Leo smiled and took the candy. "Thanks, Grandpa." We sat there for a moment in silence, the noise of the party drifting down the hall like a bad dream. Leo unwrapped the candy and popped it into his mouth. He looked at me, tilting his head to the side. "Grandpa," he asked. "Yes, Leo. Are you going to die soon?" The question hit me like a physical blow. It was so direct, so devoid of malice, yet so brutal. "Why do you ask that, Leo?" I asked, my voice steady. "Because Daddy said so," Leo replied, crunching on the peppermint. I felt a coldness spread through my veins. "What exactly did Daddy say, Leo?" "He said you are very sick in the head," Leo said, tapping his own temple. "And he said that soon you are going to go away to a special hospital and you probably won't come back." He looked back down at his game, his thumbs tapping the screen. "And he said that once you are gone, I can have your room in the basement," Leo continued. "He promised me he would paint over the ugly yellow walls and put in a big screen TV. He said it is going to be my gaming cave." I stared at my grandson. He didn't know what he was saying. He didn't know he was describing my grave. My room in the basement wasn't just a room, it was where I kept Clara's ashes. It was where I kept my old uniform. It was the last square footage of dignity I possessed. And Braden had already promised it to a 10-year-old as a video game lounge. He promised you that I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yeah, Leo said, excitedly looking up again. He said we just have to wait a couple more days. He said you are, what was the word? Expiring. Like milk. Expiring. I stood up. My knees didn't hurt anymore. The pain was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't milk, and I wasn't expiring. I looked down at Leo. I touched his hair gently. Enjoy your game, Leo, I said, but don't pick out the paint colors just yet. I turned and walked away. I wasn't going to hide in the kitchen. I wasn't going to upload the file in secret. I walked straight toward the living room. Braden was standing by the fireplace raising a glass for a toast. To prosperity, he shouted. To truth, I whispered to myself. I wasn't just fighting for money anymore. I was fighting for my life. I was fighting for Maya. And I was fighting to make sure that my grandson didn't grow up to be a monster like his father. I touched the recorder on my chest one last time to make sure the red light was still blinking. It was time to crash the party. The sound of tearing paper echoed down the basement stairs. It sounded like a wild animal was tearing through a library. I sat on my cot, my hands folded in my lap, listening to the destruction of the only sanctuary I had left. Braden was searching my room again. He had already searched it yesterday. He had searched it the day before. But panic makes a man irrational. It makes him do the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. I heard the crash of a drawer being pulled all the way out and thrown against the wall, then the heavy thud of a mattress being overturned. I stood up. I had to go up there. If I didn't, he might come down here next. And the basement was where I kept my tools, the tools he didn't know I still had. I walked up the stairs, forcing my breathing to become shallow, making my hands tremble. I opened the door to the hallway. My bedroom door was open. Braden was standing in the middle of a disaster zone. My clothes were scattered everywhere. The few books I owned, my Bible, my old engineering manuals, a few paperback westerns, were ripped apart, their spines broken. The mattress was upended. But what broke my heart was the photo frame. It was a picture of Clara and me on our wedding day. The glass was shattered. Braden had stepped on it. His expensive Italian leather shoe had crushed the face of the woman who had welcomed him into this family like a son. Braden, I whispered, clutching the doorframe. What are you doing? He spun around. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. His shirt was untucked and there was a frantic energy vibrating off him. Where is it, Ray? He screamed. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed the front of my cardigan. He slammed me against the doorframe. I know you have it. I checked the trash. I checked the recycling. I went to the dump myself and raked through garbage for 3 hours. It wasn't there. I looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. I don't know what you are looking for, Braden. My money, I have $12 in my wallet. You can have it. He shook me again, hard. My head bumped against the wood. Don't play the victim with me. The blue envelope. The scans. Did you send them to someone? Who did you talk to? I went to the post office, I stammered. His eyes went wide. He stopped breathing. What? What did you send? I sent a birthday card, I whispered, to my sister in Chicago. Braden stared at me, searching my face for a lie. But I had spent a lifetime in insurance. I knew how to keep my face blank. He shoved me away. I stumbled but caught myself before I fell. You are lying, he hissed. Or maybe you are not. Maybe you really are just a confused old fool who lost $1 million document in a pile of newspapers. He ran his hands through his hair, pulling at the roots. If I find out you are playing me, Ray... He didn't finish the threat. He didn't have to. He kicked a pile of my clothes on his way out, storming down the hall toward his study. I stood there amidst the ruin of my room. I looked at Clara's picture on the floor. I bent down and picked it up. I brushed the glass off her smiling face. I am sorry, Clara, I whispered. But I am going to make him pay for this. I wasn't going to wait for the lawyers anymore. The lawyers were slow. Braden was fast. He was planning to wire the money on Monday. Today was Friday. I needed to slow him down. I needed to make him so paranoid, so terrified that he would make a mistake. I needed to haunt him. I waited until I heard the door to his study slam shut. Then I went to work. I wasn't just a grandfather. I was a man who had wired high-voltage transformers for the city grid. I understood systems. And a house is just a system of wires and pipes. I went to the utility closet first. This house had a smart thermostat system. Braden loved it. He could control the temperature from his phone. He kept it at a precise 68 degrees because he sweated when he was nervous. And lately, he was always nervous. I opened the panel on the HVAC unit. I didn't smash anything. Smashing leaves evidence. I took a small piece of electrical tape and covered the sensor contact for the zone damper that controlled the airflow to the master bedroom and the study. Then I found the external temperature sensor wire. I stripped a tiny section and bridged it with a high-resistance resistor I had salvaged from an old radio in the basement. The system would now think the house was freezing. It would think it was 20 degrees inside. The computer brain would do exactly what it was programmed to do. It would crank the heat. It would push the furnace to maximum capacity. But because I had blocked the dampers to the other rooms, all that heat would be forced into two specific zones: his bedroom and his study. I closed the panel. It took me 3 minutes. Step 1 complete. Next, I went to the garage. The Escalade was parked there, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. It was his pride and joy. It was his escape pod. I popped the hood. I knew modern cars were mostly computers, but they still relied on basic connections. I found the mass airflow sensor. I didn't unplug it. I just loosened the clip slightly, just enough that the vibration of the engine would cause an intermittent connection. It wouldn't stop the car from starting. But 10 minutes into a drive, the computer would panic. The check engine light would flash. The car would go into limp mode. It would reduce power to 20 miles per hour to protect the engine. There is nothing more frustrating for a man in a hurry than a car that refuses to run. I closed the hood gently. Step 2 complete. Now for the psychological blow. I went back to the basement. I pulled out my old Samsung phone. I connected it to the neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi network, a trick Leo had inadvertently taught me a year ago when he complained about our internet being slow. I opened a secure anonymous email browser. I didn't send the email to Braden's work address. That would look like a whistleblower. I sent it to his private encrypted email, the one I had seen him use on his tablet when he thought I was asleep. Subject: I found the briefcase. Body: you left something behind, Braden. The blue envelope is safe. But Are You First Nevis International is watching. The price of silence just went up. I didn't sign it. I hit send. Then I turned off the phone, pulled out the battery, and hid it back behind the loose brick. I went upstairs and made myself a cup of tea. I sat in the living room in the exact chair I was allowed to sit in. I placed a blanket over my legs. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I stared at the turned-off television. I waited. 20 minutes later, it started. Braden came out of his study. He was tugging at his collar. "Why is it so hot in here?" he yelled. He pulled out his phone and checked the app. 68 degrees. It says 68 degrees. It feels like a sauna. He walked over to the thermostat on the wall and jabbed at it. The screen read 68, but the air pumping out of the vents was hot enough to bake bread. "Stupid piece of junk," he shouted. He stripped off his jacket. Sweat was already staining his dress shirt. He went back into the study. 5 minutes later, I heard a scream. It wasn't a word. It was a primal sound of frustration and fear. He ran out of the study holding his tablet. His face was pale, completely drained of blood. "Who is doing this?" he screamed at the empty room. He looked at me. I slowly turned my head and offered him a confused smile. "Is it summertime, Braden?" I asked. "It feels warm." He stared at me. He looked at my moth-eaten sweater and my blank expression. He dismissed me instantly. An old man who doesn't know what season it is couldn't possibly hack a thermostat or send an encrypted email about an offshore bank account. "No," he yelled. "No, it is not me." He was talking to himself now. He paced the room. "Someone knows," he muttered. "Someone from the bank. Or Jessica. Is she double-crossing me?" He grabbed his keys. "I need to get out of here. I need air." He ran to the garage. I heard the Escalade start. The engine roared. He backed out of the garage, tires squealing. I stayed in my chair. I sipped my tea. I counted 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. My phone, the landline on the side table, rang. I picked it up. "Hello?" It was Braden. He was screaming. "Ray? Ray, is anyone there? Did anyone come to the house?" "No, Braden," I said calmly. "Just me and the television." "My car died," he shouted. "I am on the highway and the damn car just died. And the email. Someone sent me an email." He was hyperventilating. "Braden, you sound upset," I said. "Should I call Maya?" "No, do not call Maya. Do not call anyone." He hung up. I put the phone down. The house was silent except for the hum of the furnace pumping heat into the empty rooms. He was stuck on the side of the road, sweating terrified, believing that an international banking cartel or a treacherous mistress was coming for him. He wasn't thinking about the old man in the living room anymore. He wasn't thinking about putting me in a home. He was thinking about saving his own skin from a phantom enemy. I stood up and walked to the thermostat. I carefully removed the tape and the resistor. I walked to the window and looked out at the peaceful suburban street. Paranoia is a powerful weapon. It turns a man's own mind against him. Braden thought he was playing chess, but he didn't realize the board was rigged. Tonight, he wouldn't sleep. Tonight, he would be watching the shadows. And tomorrow, when he was exhausted and desperate, he would make the mistake that would bury him. I went back to the basement. I had one more email to write. But this time, it wouldn't be to Braden. It would be to the person Braden feared most. Not the police, not the FBI. His boss. Saturday morning arrived with a heavy gray sky that matched the mood inside the house. The air conditioning was back to normal, but the atmosphere was suffocating. Braden had spent the night sleeping in the guest room, claiming he needed space to work, but I knew he was just avoiding the ghosts he thought were haunting him. I was in the laundry room sorting clothes. It was one of my assigned chores. The old man is good for folding towels, Braden would say. It kept me busy, and it kept me out of sight. I pulled Braden's charcoal gray suit jacket out of the hamper. It was the one he had worn 2 days ago, the day he claimed he had a flat tire and missed dinner. The fabric felt expensive between my rough, calloused fingers. Italian wool. Soft. Luxurious. I went through the motions, checking the pockets. It was a habit from my days as an investigator. People leave the most interesting things in their pockets. Secrets they think are safe. I felt a crinkle in the inside breast pocket. I pulled it out. It was a receipt. A piece of thermal paper that was already starting to fade, but the ink was still black enough to read. I put on my reading glasses, which I kept on a chain around my neck. The Sapphire Lounge. I knew that place. It was a high-end club downtown, the kind of place where a bottle of water cost $20 and discretion cost a lot more. I scanned down the list. Dinner for two, $400. Champagne, Dom Perignon. $600, Hotel Suite King, $800, and then at the very bottom, a separate credit card slip stapled to the back. Tiffany & Company item. Diamond tennis bracelet. Price, $5,200. I stared at the number. $5,000. 2 days ago, I had asked Braden for $40 to refill my blood pressure medication. He had sighed, rolled his eyes, and told me things were tight. He said the market was down. He said we all had to make sacrifices. He bought me the generic brand that upset my stomach instead. Things were tight, but he had $5,000 for a bracelet. I looked at Maya's wrist. She wore a simple silver watch I had given her for graduation 10 years ago. She didn't own a diamond tennis bracelet. So who was wearing it? I knew the answer. Jessica, the woman on the phone, the accomplice. I heard footsteps approaching. Light, tired footsteps. Maya. She walked into the laundry room holding a basket of her own clothes. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Hi, Daddy," she said softly. "You don't have to do that. I can do the laundry." I gripped the receipt in my hand. This was it. The moment I had to break my daughter's heart to save her life. "I am okay, sweetheart," I said, making my voice sound weary. "Just, my arthritis is acting up a bit. These buttons are tricky." I held up the jacket. I had deliberately left the receipt sticking halfway out of the pocket, the white paper stark against the dark wool. "Here, let me help," Maya said, putting down her basket. She reached for the jacket. I held my breath. She took the hanger from me. She smoothed the lapel. Then she saw it. She pulled the paper out. "What is this?" she mumbled, more to herself than to me. She unfolded it. I watched her face. I saw the confusion first, then the recognition, then the shock. "The Sapphire Lounge," she whispered. "Tuesday night." She looked at the date. Tuesday, the night Braden said he was working late at the office preparing for the audit. She flipped the paper over. She saw the jewelry receipt. Her hand flew to her mouth. A small gasp escaped her lips. $5,000. I leaned in, playing my part. "What is it, Maya? Is it a bill? Did we forget to pay the electric again? I have some change in my jar downstairs if you need it." She looked at me and her eyes were filled with a sudden terrible clarity. "No, Daddy," she said, her voice shaking. "It is not the electric bill." She stared at the receipt. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was trying to rationalize it. She was trying to find an excuse. Maybe it was for a client. Maybe he bought a gift for his mother. But $5,000, when he claimed we were broke, when he claimed my care was draining their savings. Just then we heard the heavy tread of footsteps on the stairs. Braden. He walked into the kitchen, which was connected to the laundry room. He was wearing his jogging clothes, looking irritable. "Maya, have you seen my protein powder?" he yelled. Maya didn't answer. She stood there clutching the receipt like it was a weapon. Braden walked into the laundry room. He stopped when he saw us. He saw the jacket. He saw the paper in Maya's hand. For a second, he looked terrified. But Braden was a master manipulator. Fear instantly turned into aggression. "What are you doing going through my pockets?" he snapped, snatching the jacket from the rack. Maya didn't flinch. She held up the receipt. "What is this, Braden?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but steady. Braden glanced at the paper. He didn't even read it. He knew what it was. "It is a business expense," he said dismissively, turning to walk away. "A business expense?" Maya asked, stepping in front of him. "A diamond bracelet is a business expense. A hotel suite is a business expense. You told me you were at the office on Tuesday." Braden stopped. He loomed over her. He used his height to intimidate her, just like he used it to intimidate me. "I was entertaining a client, Maya, a very important female investor. I have to woo these people. That is how I pay for this house. That is how I pay for your father's medical bills." "You refused to pay for his medicine," Maya screamed. The sound shocked me. I had never heard my daughter scream at him before. "You said we didn't have $40, but you spent $5,000 on a bracelet for a client." Braden's face turned red. The veins in his neck bulged. "You don't understand how high finance works," he shouted, spitting the words out. "You are just a nurse. You wipe bottoms for a living. Do not lecture me on how to close a deal." "I am your wife," Maya cried, tears streaming down her face now. "And I am not stupid, Braden. This isn't for a client." "Who is she? Who is the woman?" Braden laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "You are pathetic," he sneered. "You are sounding just like your father. Paranoid, delusional, stupid." He pointed a finger in her face. "I work my fingers to the bone for you people. I carry the weight of this entire family. And this is the thanks I get. Accusations." He grabbed the receipt from her hand and crumpled it up. "You are lucky I stay with you, Maya. You are lucky I don't leave you here with this senile old man and let you both rot." He threw the crumpled paper at her. It bounced off her chest and fell to the floor. "I am going to the gym," he announced. "Don't call me. And clean this mess up." He stormed out. The back door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Silence descended on the laundry room. The only sound was the hum of the dryer and the jagged breathing of my daughter. Maya stood there staring at the floor. Her shoulders were shaking. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to take my cane and beat him until he couldn't stand. But I couldn't. Not yet. I walked over to her. I placed my hand on her shoulder. "Maya," I whispered. She collapsed. She turned and buried her face in my old sweater. She sobbed. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. It was the sound of an illusion shattering, the sound of a heart breaking. I held her. I stroked her hair just like I used to when she was a little girl and scraped her knee. "It is okay, baby," I murmured. "Let it out." "Daddy," she choked out between sobs. He bought someone a bracelet." "I know, sweetheart," I said. "He called me stupid. He called me pathetic." "He is wrong," I said firmly. "You are the smartest, strongest woman I know. You are Clara's daughter." She pulled back and looked at me. Her face was blotchy, her eyes swollen. She looked young and vulnerable. I think he is having an affair," she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her with sad, knowing eyes. "And he lied about the money," she continued, the realization hitting her like a wave. "He always says we are broke. He says your care costs too much. But he has money. He has thousands of dollars." She looked at me, and for the first time in years the fog lifted completely. She didn't see the burden Braden had painted me to be. She saw her father. She saw the man who had been telling the truth all along. "You weren't confused, were you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yesterday, when you said there was cash in the bag, you weren't hallucinating." I shook my head slowly. "No, Maya. I saw it." She closed her eyes. A fresh tear rolled down her cheek. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I let him treat you like a dog. I let him threaten to put you in a home. I believed him." She grabbed my hands, squeezing them tight. "I am so sorry, Daddy. I am so sorry." I squeezed back. "Don't apologize to me, Maya. You were blinded by love. That is not a sin. But now you see." I bent down and picked up the crumpled receipt. I smoothed it out on top of the washing machine. "This is proof, Maya. This is the truth." She looked at the paper with loathing. "It hurts," she said. "It hurts so much." I nodded. I looked her straight in the eye. "The truth is a heavy burden, Maya. It cuts and it burns. But a lie. A lie is a cancer. It eats you from the inside out until there is nothing left." I wiped a tear from her chin with my thumb. "The truth hurts, but lies kill the soul, daughter. Do not let him kill your soul." Maya took a deep breath. She wiped her face. Her expression changed. The sadness began to harden into something else. Something colder. Something stronger. She looked at the receipt one last time, then she folded it and put it in her own pocket. "He is not going to the gym," she said. "His gym bag is still in the hall." "I know," I said. "He is going to see her, isn't he?" "Probably." Maya nodded. She turned to the laundry basket. She picked up Braden's expensive Italian wool jacket. She looked at it for a second, then she walked over to the trash can in the corner. She dropped the jacket into the garbage. "Daddy," she said, turning to me. "Yes, I think I would like to hear more about that trust fund you mentioned yesterday." I smiled. It was a small, grim smile. "Make some coffee, Maya," I said. "We have a lot to talk about, and we don't have much time before he comes back." She nodded. I walked out of the laundry room following my daughter. She walked taller now. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was an accomplice. But this time she was on the right side. Braden had made a fatal error. He had underestimated the wife he thought was stupid. And he had underestimated the father he thought was weak. Now he had to fight both of us. Sunday evening arrived with the weight of a funeral. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a held breath before a scream. Maya had gone to bed early claiming a migraine, but I knew she was lying awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the lies of her marriage. I sat in the dining room, the heavy oak table stretching out before me like a battlefield. The front door opened. Braden was home. He didn't stomp in this time. He walked with a terrifying, calculated purpose. He was carrying a sleek black folder under his arm. He didn't go to the kitchen. He didn't go to his study. He came straight to me. "Good evening, Ray." His voice was smooth polished, the kind of voice he used to close deals with widows and unsuspecting retirees. He placed the folder on the table in front of me. He pulled out a chair and sat down too close. I could smell the scotch on his breath, masking the scent of his fear. I looked at the folder. It was thick, expensive cardstock. "What is this, Braden?" I asked, keeping my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. "It is a solution, Ray. For everyone." He opened the folder. Inside was a document, thick with legalese stapled at the top. The title was bold and centered. General Power of Attorney. I knew exactly what this was. In my 40 years of insurance work, I had seen children use this weapon to strip their parents of everything: their homes, their savings, their dignity. It gave Braden the legal right to sign my name, sell my property, and make medical decisions on my behalf. If I signed this, I ceased to be a person. I became an asset to be liquidated. I read the first paragraph slowly. It granted him unlimited and irrevocable power over the Raymond Bishop estate. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at him with wide, confused eyes. "I thought you said I was going to Sunny Hill tomorrow. Why do I need to sign this?" Braden smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were dead. "This is just to help with the transition, Ray. Sunny Hill is expensive. The state only covers the basics. If you want a private room, if you want better food, I need access to your old accounts to pay for it. I need to be able to manage your affairs while you rest." He pulled a fountain pen from his pocket. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and black with gold trim. He uncapped it and placed it in my hand. "Sign it, Ray. Right there at the bottom, and then we can all go to sleep." I looked at the pen. I looked at the paper. I knew that if I signed this, he would sell the house immediately. He would drain the trust fund legally, claiming it was for my care. He would wipe me out and disappear, leaving Maya with nothing. But I also knew I had to push him. I had to push him over the edge. I gripped the pen awkwardly like a child learning to write. My hand shook violently. I can't read the small print. Braden, I stammered, I need my glasses. You don't need your glasses, Ray Braden said, his voice tightening. It just says you trust me. Do you trust me? I looked at him. I trust you as much as you deserve, I said softly. Braden's jaw clenched. He didn't catch the double meaning. He just heard hesitation. Sign the damn paper, Ray. I lowered the pen to the paper. I let the tip hover over the signature line. The ink began to bleed into the fiber of the page, a small black dot growing larger. My hand jerked. Oops, I whispered. I didn't just drop the pen. I convulsed. My arms spasmed, flinging the heavy fountain pen across the document. It wasn't a small smudge. A thick black river of permanent ink slashed across the page, obliterating the text, soaking into the paper and splashing onto the expensive tablecloth. The document was ruined. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked up at Braden. I made my lip tremble. I am so sorry, Braden. My hand, it just slipped. I am so clumsy. I saw the change happen in his face. It was like watching a dam break. The frustration, the paranoia, the exhaustion, the fear of the FBI, the fear of his mistress leaving him, it all coalesced into a single point of blinding rage. He didn't speak. He didn't yell. He stood up. He swung his hand. The slap echoed through the room like a gunshot. It connected with my left cheek, hard. My head snapped to the side. The force of it knocked me out of the chair. I hit the floor, my hips slamming against the hardwood. My glasses skittered across the room. Pain exploded in my face. My ear rang. I tasted blood in my mouth. I lay there on the floor looking up at him. Braden stood over me, his chest heaving. His hand was still raised. He looked at his own palm as if surprised by what it had done. Then he looked at me. For a second, I thought he might apologize. I thought he might realize he had just assaulted a 71-year-old man. But Braden was past the point of redemption. "Look what you made me do," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You useless old man. You ruin everything." He kicked the chair I had been sitting in. It crashed into the wall. "You think you can stall me? You think you can play games? I am printing another copy and you are going to sign it even if I have to break your fingers to hold the pen?" He grabbed the ruined document, crumpled it into a ball and threw it at me. It landed on my chest. "Don't move," he spat. He turned and stormed toward his study, presumably to print a fresh copy. I lay on the floor for a moment. The pain in my cheek was throbbing a hot, pulsing rhythm, but inside I was smiling. I slowly pushed myself up. My joints groaned. I touched my cheek. It was already swelling. Good. A bruise would be visible. I looked across the room. Nestled in the bookshelf between a copy of Moby Dick and a decorative vase was a small black spine of a book that wasn't a book at all. It was a wide-angle 4K camera with night vision and audio. Elias had installed it weeks ago, disguised as a hardcover novel. I looked directly into the lens. The tiny red recording light was not visible to the naked eye, but I knew it was there. I nodded once. We got him. That footage was a felony. Assault on an elderly person. Domestic abuse. Combined with the financial fraud that Slap was worth 10 years in a federal penitentiary. But I didn't call the police. Not yet. If I called them now, Braden would be arrested for assault. He would make bail in the morning. He would hire a shark lawyer who would argue provocation. The financial investigation would take months. And in the meantime, the money he had stolen, the millions in the offshore accounts, would disappear. He would transfer it from his phone in the holding cell. I needed the money back. I needed to secure Maya's future. I needed him to sign something too. I wiped the blood from my lip. I picked up my glasses. One lens was cracked. Even better. I sat back down at the table. I picked up the Mont Blanc pen from the floor. I placed it perfectly in the center of the placemat. I heard the printer whirring in the study. He was coming back. He thought he had broken me with that slap. He thought violence was the ultimate trump card. He didn't realize that he had just given me the final piece of ammunition I needed. He wanted a signature. I would give him one, but not on the power of attorney. I reached into my pocket. My hand brushed against a different document. The one I had prepared with Elias. The one that looked exactly like the power of attorney, same font, same layout, same weight of paper. But the text was very, very different. I pulled it out and slid it under the table, resting it on my knee. Braden walked back into the room. He had a fresh, crisp document in his hand. "Sit up," he commanded. I sat up straight. I looked him in the eye. I let him see the bruise forming on my face. "I am sorry, Braden," I whispered. "I will sign." Just, please don't hit me again. Braden sneered. He felt powerful now. He felt like the king of the castle. Just do as you are told, Ray, and nobody gets hurt. He slapped the new document down in front of me. Sign. I picked up the pen. I am ready, I said, but I wasn't signing his death warrant. I was preparing to hand him the pen to sign his own. The camera was rolling, the stage was set, and the devil was about to make a deal he couldn't back out of. The Mount Zion Baptist Church Fellowship Hall smelled of lemon furniture polish and lukewarm coffee. It was a smell that usually brought me comfort, a scent of community and safety, but tonight it smelled like a crime scene. I stood at the back of the room in the shadows near the double doors. I watched as my son-in-law Braden worked the room. He was standing on a small stage in front of a projector screen that displayed a graph with a line going straight up toward heaven. He was wearing a light gray suit that cost more than the church van. He held a microphone loosely in his hand, leaning forward with that earnest, practiced look of concern that he had perfected over the years. Brothers and sisters, Braden said, his voice smooth, like warm honey, I know the banks have let you down. I know the system is rigged against our community. That is why I created the Bishop Heritage Fund. Because my father-in-law Raymond, who you all know and love, would want you to have the same security that he has. He paused for effect, looking out at the 50 or so elderly faces staring up at him. These were my friends, my neighbors, people I had known for 40 years. Mrs. Higgins, who sat in the front row, still wore the hat she bought for her husband's funeral 10 years ago. Deacon Miller was there, clutching his cane, looking hopeful. They were good people, trusting people, and Braden was about to fleece them for every dime they had saved for their grandchildren. God wants you to prosper, Braden continued, ramping up the charm. And I am just the vessel. Returns of 15% guaranteed, fully insured, safe as houses, safe as houses. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. The house he lived in, my house, was mortgaged to the hilt and about to be foreclosed on. I adjusted my tie. For the last week, Braden had forced me to dress in rags. He had made me wear stained sweaters and pants that were too short to sell the narrative that I was losing my mind. But tonight, I was not Ray the senile dependent. I was wearing my Sunday best, a navy blue three-piece suit that I had bought for my retirement party. I had hidden it in the back of the cedar closet in the basement, wrapped in plastic. It was a little tight around the waist now, but the shoulders were sharp and the fabric was pristine. I had polished my shoes until they shone like mirrors. I had trimmed my beard. I stood tall, my spine stiffened by rage and righteousness. I pushed the double doors open. They swung wide with a heavy swoosh. The sound made a few heads turn in the back row, then a few more. I walked in. I didn't rush. I walked with the slow, deliberate cadence of a man who belongs exactly where he is. Braden saw me. He was in the middle of a sentence about compound interest, but the words died in his throat. His mouth stayed open, but no sound came out. His eyes went wide. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. He expected me to be locked in my room nursing a bruised cheek and a broken spirit. He expected the confused old man he had slapped yesterday. Instead, he saw Raymond Bishop, the man who used to be the head deacon of this very church. Dad, Braden stammered into the microphone. The feedback squealed a high-pitched whine that made everyone wince. I smiled. It was a warm, gracious smile that didn't reach my eyes. Don't let me interrupt you, son, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room without a microphone. I just wanted to see all my old friends. A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. Look at Raymond, Mrs. Higgins whispered to her neighbor. He looks wonderful. I thought Braden said he was sick. He looks sharp as a tack, the neighbor replied. Braden was paralyzed. He was trapped in his own public persona. He couldn't scream at me to get out. He couldn't call security. We were in church. He was playing the role of the devoted son-in-law. If he disrespected me now in front of the very people he was trying to con, his entire game would fall apart. He forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. Well, this is a pleasant surprise, he said, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. We didn't think you were feeling up to it, Ray. I feel fantastic, Braden, I said, walking down the center aisle. The fresh air does wonders for the mind. I didn't go to the stage. I didn't go to Braden. I went to the people. I stopped at Deacon Miller's table. He had a checkbook open in front of him. The pen was hovering over the signature line. Raymond Deacon Miller said, grasping my hand. It is good to see you, man. Braden was just telling us about this new opportunity, 15% returns. Can you believe it? I kept shaking his hand, holding it tight, preventing him from picking up that pen. It sounds miraculous. Deacon, I said, leaning in close, lowering my voice just enough so only the table could hear. You know, in my 40 years of insurance, whenever I saw a guaranteed 15% return, it usually meant the collateral was high risk. Deacon Miller frowned. High risk. But Braden said it is insured. I patted his shoulder gently. Did he show you the policy, Deacon, or did he just show you a PowerPoint slide? You know how much I love my son-in-law, but sometimes his enthusiasm outpaces his paperwork. Make sure you ask for the underwriter's name, just for your own peace of mind. I saw the doubt creep into Deacon Miller's eyes. He looked down at his checkbook. He closed it. I moved to the next table. Mrs. Higgins and her sister were there. They had brochures spread out like playing cards. Mrs. Higgins, I said, bowing slightly, you look lovely as always. Oh, Raymond, she blushed. We were just about to sign up. Braden says this will help pay for my granddaughter's college. That is a noble goal, I said. Braden is a good salesman, isn't he? Very persuasive. I picked up one of the glossy brochures. I pretended to study it. I noticed there is a lockup period, I said, pointing to the fine print. 2 years. That is a long time to not be able to touch your money, Mrs. Higgins. What if the roof leaks? What if you need a new car? She looked worried. He didn't mention a lockup period. He said it was liquid. I tapped the paper. Always read the footnotes, Mrs. Higgins. You remember when we fixed the church roof in '98, we learned that the devil is in the details. Just ask him about the withdrawal penalties. Watch his face when you ask. I winked at her and moved on. I worked the room like a politician, but I wasn't asking for votes. I was asking for caution. I didn't accuse Braden of anything. I didn't scream fraud. I just asked questions. The kind of boring, practical questions that destroy a fantasy. Who is the custodian bank? Is the principal FDIC insured? What is the fee structure? I could feel the energy in the room shifting. The excitement was cooling. The checkbooks were being slid back into purses and pockets. The whispers grew louder. Braden stood on the stage watching his kingdom crumble. His face was red. He was gripping the podium so hard his knuckles were white. He tried to regain control. Folks, he shouted into the microphone. If we could focus back on the presentation. The slots are filling up fast. I can only accept 5 more investors tonight before the fund closes. It was a classic high-pressure tactic. Scarcity. FOMO. Usually it worked. But then I spoke up from the back of the room. Braden, I called out casually. Mrs. Robinson here has a question about the audit history. She wants to know who audits the fund. Is it a Big Four firm? The room went silent. All eyes turned to Braden. Audit Braden stammered. Well, we use a specialized internal audit team, Ray. It is standard for boutique funds. Internal, I repeated clearly. So you audit yourself. A murmur of disapproval went through the crowd. These people might have been old, but they weren't stupid. They knew that a fox shouldn't guard the henhouse. I think I will wait on this, Braden Deacon Miller said loudly, standing up. I need to talk to my accountant first. Me too, Mrs. Higgins said, tucking her purse under her arm. The roof might leak, you never know. One by one they started to stand up. Braden looked frantic. No, wait. You are walking away from financial freedom. This offer expires tonight. But the spell was broken. I had broken it with a few whispers and a well-tailored suit. Braden looked at me. His eyes were full of pure, unadulterated hatred. If looks could kill, I would have dropped dead right there on the carpet. I looked back at him and I touched my cheek. The bruise was faint under the makeup I had applied, but I knew he could see it. I knew he remembered the slap. He stepped down from the stage, abandoning his laptop. He marched toward me. He moved fast, aggressive. The crowd parted. He stopped inches from my face. He smelled of fear and sweat. You think you are funny? He hissed so only I could hear. You think you are smart? You just cost me $100,000. I looked him up and down. I didn't cost you anything, Braden, I said calmly. I just saved these people from a predator. You are dead, he whispered. You hear me? You don't make it to Monday. I will drag you out of here by your hair if I have to. I leaned in closer. Look around, Braden, I said softly. Look at Deacon Miller. Look at the usher by the door. These men served in Vietnam with me. These people have known me for 40 years. If you touch me, if you raise your voice, if you show them the disrespect you show me in my own kitchen, they will tear you apart. You are not in your office anymore, son. You are in my house now." Braden looked around. He saw the hard stares of the men in the room. He realized I was right. He was outnumbered. He took a step back. He was trembling. "This isn't over," he said. "No," I agreed. "It is just beginning." I turned my back on him. It was the ultimate insult. I turned my back on the wolf because I knew he had no teeth left. I walked over to the dessert table. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, smiling, "is that your famous peach cobbler?" "Yes, Raymond," she beamed. "I would love a slice," I said. I took a plate. I ate the cobbler. I laughed with my friends. But inside I was counting the seconds. Braden had stormed out the side door. I heard his tires screech in the parking lot. He was running. He was panicking. He was going to make a mistake. And I would be there to catch him when he fell. I finished my cobbler. I thanked everyone. I shook hands. Then I walked out into the night. The battle at the church was won. But the war for my home was about to enter its final violent phase. Braden was desperate now, and a desperate man is capable of anything. I checked my phone. One new message from Elias. "The bait is taken. The FBI is listening. Get home. Tonight is the night." The phone rang for the 30th time that morning. It was a shrill, demanding sound that echoed through the house like a fire alarm. I sat in my usual chair in the living room, a blanket draped over my legs, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of sunlight. I was calm. I was the eye of the storm. Braden was the hurricane. He was pacing the hallway, his cell phone pressed to his ear, his other hand raking through his disheveled hair. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was undone. There were sweat stains under the arms of his expensive Egyptian cotton shirt. He looked like a man who was watching the water rise above his chin. "I cannot believe this," Braden shouted into the phone. "Mrs. Higgins is a senile old woman. She doesn't know what she is talking about. You tell the bank that the funds are incoming." He listened for a moment, his face turning a dark, dangerous shade of purple. "What do you mean a hold? Who put a hold on the transfer?" He slammed the phone down on the console table so hard I heard the screen crack. He stood there, breathing heavily, his chest heaving like a cornered animal. The church event had worked better than I had dared to hope. My whispers, my questions, my gentle nudges had spread through the community like wildfire. Deacon Miller had called his nephew, who was a tax attorney. Mrs. Higgins had called her son, who was a cop. By 9 a.m. this morning, 5 investors had already called Braden, demanding their principal back. He was bleeding money, and he had a gaping hole in his balance sheet that he needed to plug before the auditors arrived on Tuesday. He needed $2 million. He needed the Bishop Trust. He turned slowly to look at me. The mask was completely gone now. There was no charm left, no fake smiles, no dad. There was only the raw, ugly face of greed and desperation. "You did this," he whispered. He walked into the living room. He didn't stomp. He stalked. I looked up at him, keeping my mouth slightly open, my eyes wide and vacant. "Did the phone break?" I asked innocently. "Drop the act," Braden screamed. The sound tore through his throat. He grabbed the blanket off my legs and threw it across the room. "I know it was you. I know you poisoned them. I saw you whispering to Miller. I saw you laughing with Higgins. You think I'm stupid. You think I don't see what you are doing." I shrank back into the chair, clutching the armrests. "I just wanted some cobbler." "Braden," I whined. He leaned down, placing his hands on the arms of my chair, trapping me. His face was inches from mine. I could smell the stale alcohol and the bitter scent of fear. "I am done playing games, Ray. I am done waiting. I have a liquidity crisis because of you, and you are going to fix it." "I don't have any money," I whispered. Braden smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of cruelty. "No, you don't. But you have the paper, and you are going to give it to me, right now." I shook my head. "I don't know where it is. I lost it." Braden stood up straight. He looked at his watch. "It is 2:30, he said calmly. I looked at him confused. "Leo gets out of school in 30 minutes, Braden said. My heart skipped a beat. Leo, my grandson, the only innocent thing left in this house. Usually Maya picks him up. Braden continued examining his fingernails. But Maya is at work, and I am the father. I have the legal right to pick up my son." He looked at me. "I think I will go pick him up today. In fact, I think we will go for a little trip, just me and Leo, a trip I choked out. Yeah, Braden said. I have always wanted to see the Grand Canyon, or maybe drive down to Mexico. It is a long drive, dangerous roads. Lots of things can happen on the road, Ray. Accidents, carjackings. Or maybe we just disappear. Maybe you never see your grandson again. I stared at him. He wasn't bluffing. He was desperate enough to take his own son hostage. He was desperate enough to use a 10-year-old boy as a bargaining chip against an old man. You wouldn't, I whispered. He is your son. He is leverage, Braden spat. And right now he is the only leverage I have left because you ruined everything else. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his car keys. They jingled in the silence. So here is the deal, Ray. You give me the original trust document. You sign the transfer papers. And Leo comes home for dinner. You refuse or you play dumb one more time and I pick him up and we vanish. Maya will come home to an empty house, and it will be your fault. He started to turn toward the door. I am going to the car, Ray. You have 10 seconds to stop me. 1, 2. I felt a change happen inside me. It wasn't a gradual shift. It was instantaneous, like a breaker flipping in a fuse box. The fear vanished. The trembling stopped. The act I had maintained for 8 years, the stoop, the stutter, the vacant stare, it all evaporated. I wasn't Raymond the victim anymore. I was Raymond Bishop, 82nd Airborne Paratrooper. I was a man who had jumped into fire. I was a man who had raised a family in a world that wanted to crush us. I stood up. I didn't push myself up with my arms. I stood up using my legs strong and steady. I rose to my full height of 6 feet 2 inches. I uncurled my spine. I rolled my shoulders back. Braden stopped counting at 4. He sensed the shift. The air in the room changed. He turned around slowly, and he saw me. He didn't see the old man. He saw the soldier. Stop, I said. My voice didn't crack. It didn't waver. It was deep, resonant, and cold as the grave. It was a command, not a plea. Braden froze. He looked at me, confusion flickering in his eyes. He took a step back instinctively. What did you say? I took a step toward him, then another. I moved with a fluidity he had never seen before. I closed the distance between us until I was looking down at him. I said, "Stop, Braden. You aren't shaking." Braden stammered. "No," I said. "I am not." I looked him dead in the eye. I let him see the intelligence that had been there all along. I let him see the rage that I had bottled up for a decade. You want to threaten me? Fine. You want to threaten my money? Fine. But you threaten my grandson. You threaten my blood, and I will tear you apart with my bare hands before you can unlock your car door. Braden tried to laugh, but it came out as a squeak. He tried to summon his arrogance, but it withered under my gaze. You can't do anything. You are old." "I am not old, Braden," I said softly. "I am seasoned, and I have survived things that would make you wet your pants." I reached out and grabbed the lapel of his shirt. I pulled him close. He was 30 years younger than me, but he was soft. He was doughy. I was made of wire and gristle. "You want the papers?" I asked. Braden nodded, his eyes wide with terror. Yes, that is all I want." "Fine," I said. I pushed him back. He stumbled. "You can have them." Braden blinked, trying to process what was happening. You will give them to me." I walked over to the mantel and picked up a picture of Leo. I wiped a speck of dust from the frame. "I am tired, Braden. I am tired of the lies. I am tired of the fighting. If money is what it takes to get you out of our lives, then take it." I turned back to him. "But not today. The papers are not here." "Where are they?" Braden demanded, a flicker of hope returning to his eyes. "They are in a safe deposit box," I lied smoothly. "At the bank downtown. I can't get them until tomorrow morning." Braden narrowed his eyes. "You are stalling." "I am not stalling," I said. "I am negotiating. You want the money. You leave Leo alone. You pick him up, you bring him home, and you act like a father for one more night. You touch a hair on his head and I burn the documents. Do you understand?" Braden weighed his options. He looked at me, really looked at me, and he realized he had miscalculated everything. He wasn't dealing with a dementia patient. He was dealing with a man who had been playing him for a fool. Tomorrow, Braden said. Tomorrow night, I corrected. 7 p.m. Here, in this room. I will have the papers. You will have your lawyer. We will sign everything over, and then you leave. You take your money and you get out of my house and you never come back. Braden licked his lips. He was greedy. The thought of $2 million was overriding his fear. 7 p.m., he agreed. But if you try anything, Ray, if I see one cop, if you see a cop, you run, I said. But don't worry. I don't want the police involved any more than you do. I just want my family safe. Braden nodded. He straightened his shirt, trying to regain some dignity. Fine. Tomorrow night. He turned to leave. And Braden, I called out. He stopped at the door. Don't be late. He walked out. I listened to his footsteps fade. I listened to the front door open and close. I let out a long, slow breath. I wasn't going to the bank tomorrow. I walked to the window and watched him get into his car. He was going to pick up Leo. He would bring him home because he thought he had won. He thought I had capitulated. He thought the money was his. He didn't know that tomorrow night at 7 p.m. he wasn't attending a signing. He was attending his own execution. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Elias. It is set, I said. 7 p.m. Bring the cavalry. I hung up. I looked at my hands. They were steady as rocks. The old man was gone. The patriarch was back. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times. Each gong felt like a judge's gavel striking a sound block. I sat at the head of the dining room table, my hands resting flat on the polished mahogany. I was not shaking. I was not looking down. I was looking straight at the front door. Outside, the sky had opened up. A torrential Georgia thunderstorm was hammering against the roof, flashing lightning that illuminated the room in stark, violent bursts of white. It was fitting weather for a funeral, and tonight we were burying Braden's future. The doorbell rang. I didn't get up. I let them wait. Braden was already inside, pacing the foyer. I heard him open the door. "You are late," Braden hissed. "Relax." The traffic was a nightmare. The voice was oily and smooth. Julian Thorne. I knew Julian. He and Braden had been fraternity brothers at college. Julian had scraped through law school by the skin of his teeth and had been disbarred 5 years ago for tampering with witness evidence. Now he operated as a consultant, facilitating the kind of deals that reputable lawyers wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. They walked into the dining room. Julian looked exactly as I remembered him, only heavier. He wore a pinstripe suit that was trying too hard to be respectable. He carried a leather briefcase that looked suspiciously similar to the one Braden had left on my driveway. "Well, well," Julian said, dropping his briefcase on the table. "If it isn't Raymond, you are looking alert. Braden told me you were having trouble tying your shoelaces these days." I didn't smile. I didn't blink. "Sit down, Julian," I said. "Julian, Akio." My voice was low, cutting through the sound of the thunder. Julian raised an eyebrow at Braden. Braden looked nervous. He was vibrating with adrenaline. He pulled out a chair and sat down, drumming his fingers on the table. "Let's just get this done," Braden said. "Where are the papers?" "Ray?" I looked at him. "Where is Leo?" I asked. "He is upstairs in his room playing video games," Braden said quickly. "He is fine. I kept my end of the bargain. Now keep yours." I nodded slowly. I reached down to the floor beside my chair and picked up a thick manila envelope. I placed it in the center of the table. Braden reached for it, his eyes hungry. I slammed my hand down on top of the envelope. "Not yet," I said. Braden recoiled, his face twisting in anger. "What now?" "We had a deal." I looked at Julian. "I want your lawyer to verify something first," I said. Julian sighed, looking bored. "Verify what, Raymond?" "That you are signing over your assets to your legal guardian. It is a standard transfer." I pulled a single sheet of paper from my breast pocket. It was folded in thirds. "This," I said. I slid it across the table to Julian. "This is a rider," I explained. "An addendum. If I am giving Braden the trust, I want to make sure he cannot come after me for anything else. No future claims for room and board. No retroactive billing for my care. This document says that once I hand over the trust, we are square. Clean slate." Julian picked up the paper. He scanned it quickly. His eyes darted back and forth. "It looks standard," Julian said, shrugging. "A mutual release of claims. It protects both of you." He tossed it to Braden. "Sign it," Julian said. It just means you can't sue him for eating your food for the last 8 years. Braden laughed. He picked up his Mont Blanc pen, the same one he had tried to force me to use yesterday. Gladly, Braden said. I never want to think about you again after tonight. He signed the paper with a flourish, a big, arrogant signature that took up half the page. Good, I said. I lifted my hand from the manila envelope. Braden grabbed it. He tore it open. He pulled out the blue folder. The original Bishop Family Trust. He opened it. He saw the wet ink of Clara's signature. He saw the bank account numbers. He saw the valuation, $2.5 million. He looked up at me, his eyes shining with greed and relief. Finally, he whispered. He looked at Julian. Do I need to sign this too? Braden asked. Julian nodded. You need to sign as the new trustee and the beneficiary. There are 3 signature lines on the back page. Braden flipped to the back of the document. He didn't read the text. He didn't check the clauses. He just saw the line that said signature, and he attacked it with his pen. Scratch, scratch, scratch. He signed 3 times. He stamped it with his thumbprint. He closed the folder and clutched it to his chest. Done, Braden said. It is done. He looked at me with a smirk. You can pack your bags, Ray. I want you out by noon tomorrow. I will call an Uber for you. Maybe they can drop you off at a homeless shelter. Julian chuckled, packing up his things. Pleasure doing business, Raymond. I sat there. I didn't move. I didn't look defeated. I looked at the single sheet of paper Braden had signed first, the mutual release. I picked it up. I folded it carefully and put it back in my pocket. Actually, Braden, I said, before you start spending that money, I have a question. Braden stood up. I don't answer to you anymore, old man. Did you read section 4.2, I asked. Braden stopped. He frowned. What? On the document you just signed, I said, pointing to his chest where he was clutching the trust folder. The transfer agreement. Did you read section 4.2? Braden rolled his eyes. It is a standard trust transfer, Ray. Julian checked it. Julian looked up suddenly alert. He hadn't checked the trust folder. He had only checked the release form I gave him separately. He assumed the trust folder was the original document I had retrieved from the bank. I didn't read the whole trust document just now, Julian stammered. I assumed it was the original from 2016. I smiled. It is the original cover, I said, and the original signature page from Clara, but the middle pages I had to update those. You know, to reflect the current reality. The color drained from Braden's face. He looked down at the folder in his hands. What did you do? He whispered. Open it, I said. Turn to page 4. Braden opened the folder. His hands were shaking now. He flipped the pages. 1, 2, 3, 4. He read. His lips moved silently. Then they stopped. His eyes bulged. He dropped the folder onto the table as if it were burning hot. No, he gasped. That is not legal. What does it say? Julian asked, grabbing the folder. Julian read the clause out loud. His voice wasn't smooth anymore. It was shrill. Section 4.2, the signatory hereby identified as Braden Washington, acknowledges full and sole responsibility for all debts, liens, and fraudulent loans associated with the properties listed in Schedule A. Furthermore, the signatory confesses that all funds previously withdrawn from the Bishop estate were used for personal gain and illicit activities, including but not limited to wire fraud and money laundering. By signing this document, the signatory agrees to personal liability for the repayment of $2.5 million to the estate of Clara Bishop. Julian looked up at me, his mouth agape. You switched the pages, Julian whispered. This isn't a transfer of assets. This is a confession of guilt. And he signed it, I said, leaning back in my chair, 3 times, with a thumbprint, witnessed by his own lawyer. Braden stared at the paper. Then he stared at me. You tricked me, he screamed. He lunged for the paper. I was faster. I grabbed the folder and pulled it to my side of the table. It doesn't matter if you tear it up, Braden, I said calmly. Elias has a digital copy. And that pen you used, I pointed to the Mont Blanc. It has a camera in the cap. I lied, but he didn't know that. Braden looked at the pen in horror. He threw it across the room. This won't hold up in court, Julian shouted. It was signed under duress. It was entrapment. Was it? I asked. I asked you to read it. I asked you to verify it. You were just too greedy and too arrogant to do your job. You assumed I was a stupid old man. That is not duress, Julian. That is negligence. Braden was hyperventilating. He was pulling at his collar. "You set me up," he choked out. "You set me up. I stood up. I told you, Braden. I am not the victim here." I looked at the clock. 7:15. "We have company," I said. Through the rain, blue lights began to flash against the dining room window. No sirens this time. Just a silent, overwhelming swarm. Braden ran to the window. "FBI!" he screamed. "It is the FBI!" He turned to me, his eyes wild. He looked at the back door. "Don't bother," I said. "Elias is at the back door," and he brought his shotgun. Braden looked at Julian. Julian was already backing away, holding his hands up. I didn't know Julian yelled at me. I didn't know about the fraud. I was just a notary. Braden looked at me. The realization hit him. The money was gone. The house was gone. His freedom was gone. "Why?" he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Why didn't you just let me leave?" Because I said, walking around the table until I was standing right in front of him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled receipt for the diamond bracelet he had thrown at Maya. "Because you broke my daughter's heart. And you underestimated her father." Bam. 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 FBI. Open the door. Braden slumped into the chair, burying his face in his hands. I walked to the front door. I didn't rush. I adjusted my tie. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked like a man who had just taken out the trash. I opened the door. The pounding on the front door was rhythmic and heavy, a drumbeat of justice that shook the entire frame of the house. Outside, the rain slashed against the windows, blurring the red and blue lights into a kaleidoscope of warning. Inside the dining room, the air was so thick with tension it felt like breathing underwater. Braden stared at the door, then back at me. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. The color had drained from his skin, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting under heat. He looked at the confession. He had just signed the paper that admitted to wire fraud and theft and embezzlement. Then the panic broke. It shattered into violence. He let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. It was the sound of a man who sees his entire world collapsing and decides to burn it down on his way out. "You old devil," he shrieked. He didn't run for the back door. He didn't run for the window. He lunged across the table at me. His eyes were wild, bulging from their sockets. He reached for my throat, his fingers hooked into claws. He wanted to silence me. He wanted to crush the witness who had outsmarted him. Julian, the lawyer, scrambled backward, tripping over his own briefcase and falling against the china cabinet. He was useless, a coward in a pinstripe suit watching his client implode. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. Braden was 30 years younger than me. He went to the gym 5 days a week. He drank protein shakes, but he had never fought for his life. He had never stood on a drop zone with the wind howling and the ground rushing up to meet him. I had. As he lunged, I simply stood up and stepped to the side. He crashed into my chair, sending it skidding across the floor. He stumbled, his expensive Italian loafers slipping on the polished wood. He caught himself on the edge of the table, breathing hard saliva flying from his mouth. "I will kill you," he gasped, turning to face me again. "I will kill you before they get in here." He grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the center of the table. He raised it high above his head. I braced myself. I clenched my fists, ready to deflect the blow. I was old, but I was not helpless. But I didn't have to strike him. "Put it down, Braden." The voice cut through the room like a razor blade. It was cold. It was steady. It was absolute. It wasn't my voice. Braden froze, his arm still raised, the vase trembling in his grip. He turned his head slowly toward the kitchen doorway. Maya was standing there. My daughter. She wasn't wearing her nurse's scrubs. She wasn't wearing the stained sweatpants she usually wore around the house to be comfortable. She was wearing a black dress, the one she had worn to Clara's funeral. She looked tall. She'd looked regal. And she looked dangerous. She had been standing in the shadows of the hallway the entire time. She had heard every word. She had heard Braden sign the paper. She had heard him admit to stealing her mother's legacy. She had heard him plan to abandon her and run to Mexico. Maya Braden breathed, lowering the vase slightly. His eyes darted back and forth, calculating, trying to find an angle, trying to find a lie that would work. "Baby, listen to me," he said, his voice shifting instantly into that sickening, manipulative whine. "It is not what it looks like. Your father, he tricked me. He trapped me. He is working with the police to frame me." Maya didn't speak. She just walked into the room. Her steps were slow and deliberate. She stopped next to me. She didn't look at me, but I could feel the heat radiating off her. She was burning with a rage that had been suppressed for 8 years. "Frame you?" Maya asked softly. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. Did he frame you when you signed your name 3 times? Did he frame you when you admitted to stealing $2.5 million from my mother? Braden laughed a desperate, high-pitched sound. That paper is fake, Maya. It is a trick. He swapped the pages. I didn't know what I was signing. You never know what you are signing, Braden, Maya said. That is the problem, isn't it? You just sign and take. You signed for the mortgage on this house, but you never paid a dime. You signed for the car, but you used my credit. You signed our marriage license, but you never honored a single vow. Braden's face twisted. The charm evaporated. The predator resurfaced. Don't you dare talk to me like that, he snarled, stepping toward her. He still held the vase. I am your husband. I am the head of this household. He puffed out his chest, trying to make himself look big, trying to intimidate her the way he had done for a decade. You believe this old man over me, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. Look at him. He is a relic. He is a burden who put food on this table, Maya. Me who paid the electric bill so you could have lights. Me who managed the finances so you didn't have to worry your pretty little head about math. Me. He was screaming now, trying to drown out the pounding on the front door. I sacrificed everything for this family. I carried you. I carried him. And this is the thanks I get. You side with a senile old man who hides money in the trash. I took a step forward, ready to intervene, but Maya put a hand on my chest. She pushed me back gently. This is my fight, Daddy, she whispered. She looked at Braden. She looked at the sweat dripping down his face. She looked at the man she had loved, the man she had defended, the man she had nursed through the flu and supported through job changes. And she saw nothing. You didn't pay for anything, Braden, she said clearly. She reached into the pocket of her dress. You paid with my mother's money. You paid with the inheritance you stole from us. You didn't carry us. We carried you. You are a parasite, Braden, a tick that burrowed into this family and sucked us dry. Braden sneered. You have no proof. That paper is inadmissible. It is hearsay. I will get a real lawyer, not this idiot Julian. I will sue you for defamation. I will take the house. I will take custody of Leo. You will be on the street. Maya smiled. It was a smile that made my blood run cold. It was the smile of an executioner. You want proof? She asked. She pulled out a thick stack of photographs. She didn't hand them to him. She threw them. She threw them hard right into his face. The glossy prints fluttered through the air like confetti crashing against his chest, falling to the floor around his feet. Braden looked down. He saw them. Pictures of him at the Sapphire Lounge. Pictures of him holding hands with Jessica. Pictures of him kissing her in the parking lot of the hotel. But those were just the appetizers. Maya reached into her pocket again. And here is the main course, she said. She threw another stack of papers. These were bank statements, the ones Elias had dug up. The ones showing the transfers to the offshore accounts, the ones showing the purchase of the diamond bracelet, the ones showing the wire transfers to a shell company in Mexico under the name Freedom Ventures. Look at the dates, Braden, Maya said, her voice rising, her composure finally cracking under the weight of the betrayal. Look at the date on that bracelet receipt, Tuesday. You told me we couldn't afford Dad's heart medication on Tuesday. You let my father suffer chest pains while you were buying diamonds for your mistress. Braden stared at the papers scattered on the rug. The evidence was overwhelming. It was physical. It was undeniable. He dropped the vase. It hit the floor with a dull thud, rolling under the table. Maya, he whispered. Maya, please. It was a mistake. She meant nothing to me. It was stress. I was stressed about the market. I made a mistake. A mistake, Maya screamed. A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. A mistake is burning the toast. Systematically stealing millions of dollars from your dying mother-in-law is not a mistake, Braden. It is a crime. Planning to abandon your wife and son to flee the country is not a mistake. It is evil. She stepped closer to him, her eyes blazing. You called me stupid yesterday, she said. You said I was just a nurse who wipes bottoms. Well, you are right about one thing, Braden. I am a nurse. I deal with sickness every day. I clean up messes. I handle things that make other people vomit. She pointed at the door. And I know how to excise a tumor. Braden fell to his knees. He started to cry. Ugly, desperate tears. Maya, don't let them take me, he sobbed, reaching for the hem of her dress. I can fix this. We can fix this. I will pay it back. I will fire Jessica. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Please, baby. For Leo. Do it for Leo. Maya looked down at him. She pulled her dress away from his grasping fingers as if he were contagious. I am doing this for Leo, she said. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but her chin was high. Open the door, Daddy, she said. Braden wailed, collapsing onto the floor, curling into a ball amidst the photos of his infidelity. No, no, he screamed, pounding his fists against the wood. Julian, the lawyer, was already standing by the window, his hands raised in surrender, trying to distance himself from the man on the floor. I looked at my daughter. I had never been prouder of her than I was in that moment. She had walked through the fire and come out made of steel. I walked to the front door. The pounding had stopped. Now there was just a heavy, authoritative silence waiting on the other side. I unlocked the deadbolt. It clicked loudly, a sound of finality. I turned the handle. The door swung open. Rain blew in, soaking the foyer. Standing there on the porch, drenched in rain, wearing windbreakers with bold yellow letters, were 6 agents. And behind them, holding a shotgun that he didn't need to use, was Elias. He gave me a curt nod. Mr. Bishop, the lead agent, asked, stepping forward, water dripping from the brim of his cap. I stepped aside. I gestured toward the dining room where the sobbing of a broken man filled the air. He is all yours, I said. The agents swarmed past me. Their boots squeaked on the hardwood. I watched them go. I didn't follow. I didn't need to see the handcuffs. I didn't need to see the perp walk. I looked at Elias. It is over, I said. Elias lowered his shotgun. He smiled a crooked, toothless smile. Not yet, Ray, he said, pointing to the driveway. Look who is home. I looked past the swarm of government vehicles. A yellow school bus had just pulled up. It was late due to the storm. The doors opened, and Leo, my grandson, stepped out his backpack over his head to shield him from the rain. He looked at the police cars. He looked at the flashing lights. He looked terrified. I ran. I ran faster than I had in 20 years. I ran out into the rain, ignoring the arthritis, ignoring the cold. I reached him just as he stepped onto the curb. Grandpa, he cried, his voice trembling. What is happening? Is Daddy okay? I scooped him up. I wrapped my arms around him, shielding his eyes from the house, shielding him from the sight of his father being dragged out in irons. I held him tight. Everything is going to be okay, Leo, I whispered into his hair. The storm is here, but it is going to wash everything clean. I carried him toward the garage, away from the front door, away from the wreckage of the past. We were going to be okay, because the tumor was gone, and the healing could finally begin. The agents moved through the dining room with surgical precision. Braden was still on his knees, a broken man surrounded by the wreckage of his own lies. But as the first pair of handcuffs clicked around his wrists, the panic in his eyes turned into a final ugly surge of defiance. He looked up at the lead agent, then at Maya, and finally at me. He started to laugh, a jagged, desperate sound that lacked any real mirth. You think this is it? Braden spat, struggling as they pulled him to his feet. You think a few photos and a signed paper mean anything? I am a board-certified financial advisor. I have the best legal team in the state. By tomorrow morning, Julian will have that confession thrown out as coerced. And then what? He leaned toward me, his face twisted in a sneer of pure arrogance. Look around you, old man. I stand on the deeds. My name is on the titles. Every property, every offshore account, every cent of that trust is legally under the control of BW Holdings. You have no standing. You are just a tenant in a guest room. Even if I go to jail for a few months for a minor scuffle, I still own you. I will sell this house from my cell. I will leave you and Maya with nothing but the clothes on your backs. You haven't won. You have just made me angry. Julian, the lawyer, was nodding along, trying to regain his composure. Braden is right, Julian muttered, straightening his disheveled tie. The corporate structure is ironclad. You cannot untangle a multi-state holding company with a few backyard snapshots. I stood there listening to them. I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the same feeling I had 40 years ago when I finally found the one loose wire that proved an entire warehouse fire was an insurance scam. The arrogance of criminals is always their undoing. They think the world is as small as their own greed. I walked over to the sideboard and picked up the remote control. You always said I watched too much television, Braden, I said softly. You said it was rotting my brain. But the local news is quite educational if you know what to look for. I pressed the power button. The large flat-screen TV on the wall flickered to life. I turned the volume up. The screen didn't show weather or sports. It was a breaking news bulletin from the local business channel. The banner at the bottom of the screen read in bold red letters, "Breaking news. Federal investigation into B. Sterling and BW Holdings." The news anchor was standing in front of the federal courthouse downtown. Federal authorities have just announced a massive sweep into several local investment firms, the anchor said. Leading the list is BW Holdings, managed by Braden Washington. Sources say the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission have been working with a whistleblower for several days, receiving thousands of pages of internal documents, offshore routing numbers, and evidence of a massive Ponzi scheme masked as a property management trust. Braden's jaw dropped. He stopped struggling against the agents. He stared at the screen as if it were a mirror showing his own ghost. The anchor continued. A federal judge has already signed an emergency order freezing every asset associated with BW Holdings. This includes 14 properties, multiple offshore accounts, and the personal residence of the CEO. Because the funds were identified as being derived from the theft of a private estate, the court has appointed a receiver to restore the assets to their original rightful owner, Raymond Bishop. I clicked the TV off. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 days, Braden, I said, walking closer to him. 3 days, he whispered. While you were busy buying bracelets and planning your escape to Mexico, Elias and I were busy. We didn't just send a letter to your lawyer. We sent the entire history of your fraud to the people who actually have the power to stop you. We sent the digital scans. We sent the recorded conversations from the study. We sent the offshore routing numbers you thought were hidden behind 3 layers of encryption. Braden looked at the lead agent. The agent didn't look back. He just tightened the grip on Braden's arm. You are not being arrested for hitting me, Braden, I said. That was just the cherry on top. You are being arrested for wire fraud, money laundering, and grand larceny. The federal government doesn't care about your corporate structure. They care about their money. And since you used my name to hide their money, they decided to give it all back to me just to make the paperwork easier. Braden collapsed. His legs simply gave out. If the agents hadn't been holding him, he would have hit the floor again. All the fire, all the arrogance, all the smug certainty was gone. He was just a small, hollow man in an expensive suit that didn't fit him anymore. Maya stepped forward. She looked at the man she had called her husband. She didn't look angry anymore. She just looked done. You told me my father was a burden, Braden, Maya said, her voice echoing in the quiet room. You said he was a drain on our lives. But he was the only thing keeping this family from falling into the pit you dug for us. She reached out and took the gold watch off Braden's wrist, the one he had bought with her mother's money. She didn't say a word. She just handed it to me. Braden didn't even protest. He was sobbing now, the long, ugly cries of a man who realized he had lost everything. Get him out of here, the lead agent commanded. The agent started to lead them out. Julian Thorne was crying too, babbling about a plea deal about how he was just a victim of Braden's charisma. Nobody listened. As they reached the front door, the rain was still pouring down. More black SUVs had arrived, blocking the street. The neighbors were all out on their porches now, umbrellas in hand, watching the man who thought he was king being led away in shame. I stood in the foyer and watched them put Braden in the back of a cruiser. The door slammed shut. The sirens finally turned on a low, rhythmic pulse that signaled the end of the nightmare. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Elias. He looked tired, his old army jacket soaked with rain, but his eyes were bright. We did it, Ray, he said. Clara can rest now. I nodded. I looked at the house. My house. The house I had built with Clara. It didn't feel like a prison anymore. The air felt lighter. The shadows were gone. I walked back into the living room. Maya was sitting on the sofa holding Leo, who had come back downstairs after the noise died down. She was whispering to him, telling him that everything was going to be okay. That the bad man was gone. I sat down in my chair. My chair. I didn't need the blanket anymore. I didn't need to shake. I didn't need to play the part of the invisible man. I looked at my daughter and my grandson. We have a lot of work to do, Maya said, looking up at me. The house needs cleaning, the garden needs tending, and we have to figure out what to do with all those properties the court is giving back. I smiled, a real smile, one that reached my eyes. We will figure it out, I said. Together. Leo looked at me, his eyes wide with wonder. Grandpa, are you a superhero? I laughed. No, Leo. I am just a man who knows how to read a contract. and a man who never leaves his family behind. I looked out the window at the clearing sky. The storm was moving out, leaving the world wet and sparkling under the streetlights. The invisible man was gone, and for the first time in 8 years, I was exactly where I belonged. Home. The lead agent signaled his team, and the dining room became a blur of tactical vests and heavy boots. Braden was hoisted up from the floor, his expensive suit jacket bunched up around his ears like a straitjacket. The silver handcuffs bit into his wrists, and for the first time the weight of reality seemed to crush the breath out of him. But Braden being Braden, he could not go out quietly. He started to scream, his voice cracking and hitting notes of pure hysteria. "You cannot do this!" he shrieked, his spit flying onto the polished mahogany table. "I have rights. I want my phone call. Julian, tell them this is an illegal search. This is a setup by a senile old man who belongs in a padded cell. You are all going to lose your badges for this. Julian." Thorne was already being led out by another agent. His head bowed, his arrogance evaporated into a puddle of sweat. He didn't even look back at his partner in crime. In the world of predators, the first one to get caught is always the first one to be abandoned. I stood by the fireplace watching the scene with the same calm I used to have when examining a totaled car for a claim. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a deep sense of equilibrium being restored to the world. "Wait," I said. The agents stopped. They looked at me with respect. They knew I was the one who had handed them the keys to this entire operation. I walked toward Braden. The agents loosened their grip slightly, allowing me to stand inches from his face. Braden glared at me, his eyes bloodshot and full of a poisonous hatred. "Enjoy the house while you can, Ray," he hissed through gritted teeth. "I will be out on bail by midnight, and when I come back I am going to make sure you never see the sun again. You think you are so smart with your little recordings and your fake contracts? It is just money, Ray. I will hire a team of lawyers that will make you look like a common thief." I didn't answer right away. I leaned in closer until I could smell the sour scent of his defeat. I lowered my voice so only he could hear me, so the agents and even Maya wouldn't catch the final blow. "I am not worried about bail, Braden," I whispered. Because you are not going to a local jail. You are going to a federal holding facility, and you are never coming out." Braden sneered. "For what, a little wire fraud? I will do 5 years in a country club prison and come out rich." I smiled. It was the smile of a man who had been holding a winning hand for nearly a decade. "Do you remember 8 years ago, Braden?" I asked. "Right after the fire, right after Clara died, you were helping me clean out the remains of my office in the old house." Braden's eyes flickered with confusion. "What does that have to do with anything?" "You found an envelope in my briefcase?" I continued, my voice a low rumble. It was unsealed. Inside was a winning Powerball ticket. $50,000. I saw you find it. I saw you slide it into your pocket while I was sitting on the floor crying for my wife. You thought I was too broken to notice. You cashed it 2 weeks later, didn't you? That was the seed money you used to start BW Holdings. That was the foundation of your entire empire." Braden's lip curled. "So what? You want to report a stolen lottery ticket from 8 years ago? Good luck proving that, you old fool." I chuckled, and the sound made the hair on Braden's neck stand up. "That is the thing, Braden. I didn't report it, because I didn't buy that ticket." Braden frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I was a senior appraiser for National General Insurance, remember," I whispered. "We were running an internal audit on the corporate slush fund. My boss and we set a trap for a different executive who was stealing. I bought that ticket using traceable marked funds from the federal insurance pool. It was a bait ticket. It was registered as evidence in a grand jury investigation before it even left the convenience store." The blood drained from Braden's face. He looked like he was about to faint. "I saw you take it," I said, "and I realized then what kind of man you were. I realized you had let Clara's house burn because you wanted the insurance money. I realized you were a monster, so I stayed silent. I let you cash it. I watched you use federal evidence money to open your bank accounts. I watched you layer your entire business on top of a felony theft of government property." Braden started to shake, his knees knocked together. "For 8 years, every cent you have touched has been tainted, Braden. Every transaction you made was a continuation of that original theft. You haven't been committing private fraud. You have been embezzling from the federal government. The FBI didn't just come here for the trust fund, Ray. They came because that lottery ticket finally linked your accounts to the missing federal pool. I leaned in so close my breath hitched his ear. There is no bail for stealing from the Treasury, Braden. There is no lawyer who can untangle an 8-year-old federal bait trap. You didn't steal from me. You stole from the people who never forget and never forgive. I waited 8 years for you to build this house of cards high enough so that when it fell, the impact would bury you in the earth. I pulled back and looked him in the eye. Goodbye, son, I said. Braden's mouth opened, but only a dry, rattling sound came out. He looked at the agents, then back at me. The realization hit him with the force of a high-speed collision. He hadn't been the hunter. He had been a fly in a web that had been spinning since the day my wife died. He had spent 8 years thinking he was a genius when he was actually just a walking evidence file. He collapsed, truly collapsed this time. The agents had to practically drag his limp body across the foyer. He wasn't screaming anymore. He was making a low, whimpering sound like a beaten dog. The front door opened and the wet night air rushed in. The agents moved him out into the rain. I watched from the threshold as they shoved him into the back of a black SUV. The door slammed with a heavy final thud. The sirens didn't scream as they pulled away. They just hummed a steady low pulse that disappeared into the darkness. I stood there for a long time watching the red taillights vanish around the corner. The rain fell on my face, cooling the heat of the anger I had carried for so long. Maya walked up behind me. She placed a hand on my arm. She hadn't heard what I whispered, but she saw the change in Braden. She saw the moment his soul left his body. "Is he gone?" she asked. "He is gone, Maya," I said. "Truly gone." She leaned her head on my shoulder. We stood there in the doorway of the house I had reclaimed. The house that was no longer a monument to his greed, but a sanctuary for our family once again. I reached into my pocket and felt the small, smooth stone I had kept since the day of the fire. I had promised Clara that I would make it right. It took me 8 years of playing the fool, 8 years of enduring insults, and 8 years of being invisible. But the truth had finally come home. I looked at my daughter and the grandson who was now sleeping peacefully upstairs. "Let's close the door." "Maya," I said, "it's getting cold." I reached out and grabbed the handle. I pulled the heavy oak door shut and turned the deadbolt. The click was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The trap was closed. The war was over. And for the first time in a very long time, the Bishop family was going to have a good night's sleep. The flashing blue lights finally faded into the distance, leaving our street in a darkness so heavy it felt like velvet. For the first time in 8 years, the air didn't taste like Braden's expensive cologne or the metallic tang of his lies. It tasted like rain, cold, honest Georgia rain. Maya stood on the sidewalk, her arm wrapped tightly around Leo's shoulders. They both looked like survivors of a shipwreck staring at the house that had been our prison for a decade. A team of federal agents was still inside their silhouettes, moving past the windows as they hauled out boxes of evidence. Then came the finality. A thick yellow plastic tape was stretched across the front door. "Crime scene, do not cross." Maya turned to me, her face pale under the streetlights. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They are sealing it. Everything. The bank accounts, the house, even my car. We have nowhere to go. Braden took it all. He burned it all down." I looked at my daughter. She was 35 years old, a woman who had seen life and death in the ICU, but right now she looked like that little girl who had lost her favorite doll in the park. She felt homeless. She felt defeated. I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "Maya." I said, "Look at me." She raised her eyes, wet with tears and exhaustion. "I am an insurance man," I said softly. "I spent 40 years calculating risk. I spent 40 years watching people lose everything in fires and floods. Do you really think I would let my daughter and my grandson sleep on the street? Do you think I didn't have a plan B?" Maya frowned, confused. "But Daddy, Braden said you were broke. He said your pension was gone." "Braden only knew what I allowed him to see," I said. "He saw a senile old man. He didn't see the man who started a private savings account in a small credit union across town the day I met him. He didn't see the man who had been putting away $500 a month from a secret consulting gig for old friends in the industry." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a heavy brass key. I didn't hand it to her. I placed it in Leo's small, warm hand. "Leo," I said, Do you remember that brick townhouse on Cascade Road, the one with the big oak tree in the front and the porch that smells like jasmine? Leo's eyes brightened. The one near the park where you used to take me for ice cream when Dad was working, I nodded. I bought it 3 months ago, Leo. It is not a mansion. It does not have a heated pool or a wine cellar. But it has 3 bedrooms, a kitchen that gets the morning sun, and a backyard big enough for a dog. And most importantly, it is paid for, in full, in your mother's name. Maya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Daddy, how? By being the invisible man. Maya, I said. While Braden was busy stealing millions, I was busy saving the only things that mattered. It is small and it is humble, but it is ours. And the FBI can't touch it because it was bought with clean money earned with honest sweat. We didn't wait for the agents to finish. We didn't take anything from the big house except for a few suitcases of clothes and Clara's ashes. We left the designer furniture, the crystal vases, and the Italian rugs behind. They were tainted. They belonged to the ghost of a man who never existed. The new place was quiet. When we walked inside, it smelled like fresh paint and pine needles. There was no alarm system chirping at us. There were no cameras in the hallway. Maya walked through the living room, touching the walls, as if she couldn't believe they were real. She stopped in the kitchen and leaned against the counter. Then she started to cry again. But these weren't the jagged, terrified sobs from before. They were soft. They were the sound of a burden being laid down. She turned to me, her eyes red. I am so sorry, Daddy, she choked out. I let him treat you like a dog. I believed his lies about you being sick. I chose him over you for so long. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. I walked over and pulled her into a hug. I held her tight the way I did when she was 6 years old and afraid of the dark. Maya, listen to me, I said, my voice firm. I already forgot. She pulled back, looking at me with shock. You forgot? After everything he did, I am 71 years old, daughter, I said. I don't have room in my heart for grudges against my own blood. Life is too short to carry around the weight of other people's sins. You were manipulated by a professional. You were blinded by a man who made a career out of deception. That is not your fault. What matters is that you woke up. What matters is that we are standing here now. I kissed her forehead. Go get some sleep, Maya. Tomorrow we start over. The next afternoon, the sun finally came out. It was a bright golden Georgia Sunday. I found an old wooden crate in the garage of the new house. Inside was a leather glove that was older than Braden, a ball that had lost its shine, and an aluminum bat. Leo was sitting on the back porch looking lost. He had spent his whole life being told to be quiet, to stay out of the way, to be a little gentleman in a miniature tuxedo. He didn't know how to just be a boy. Leo, I called out, tossing him the glove. Catch. He fumbled it, the glove hitting the grass. He looked at me terrified, waiting for a lecture on his clumsiness. Braden used to yell at him if he dropped a fork at dinner. I laughed. It is okay, son. Even the pros drop the ball. Pick it up. I spent the next 2 hours in that backyard. My hip was aching and my knees were protesting, but I didn't care. I taught him how to stand. I taught him how to watch the ball, not the bat. I taught him that it was okay to swing and miss as long as you kept your eyes on the goal. I watched the joy bloom in his face. I watched the tension leave his shoulders. For the first time, he wasn't a pawn in a game of status. He was just a kid playing ball with his grandpa. It was a simple thing, a quiet thing, but it was the most powerful act of rebellion I could imagine against the ghost of Braden. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, I went out to the small fire pit in the corner of the yard. I had one last piece of business to take care of. I brought out the old broken briefcase, the one that had started it all. The Italian leather was scuffed, the zipper was torn, and it smelled of Braden's arrogance. I dropped it into the pit. I struck a match. I watched the flame catch the edge of the leather. The fire grew orange and hot, devouring the expensive skin. I watched the gold-plated buckles melt and the silk lining blacken. As the smoke rose into the twilight, I felt the last of the poison leave my system. Braden thought he was the architect of his own destiny, but he was just a man building a castle on a foundation of sand. He thought he could erase me, make me invisible, turn me into a ghost in my own home. But he forgot that ghosts are the ones who know where the bodies are buried. I sat on a lawn chair watching the embers glow. Maya came out and sat next to me, a cup of coffee in her hand. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about, Daddy?" she asked. "I was thinking about your mother," I said. I think she would like this house. It has good bones. She would love it, Maya agreed. We sat in the silence listening to the crickets and the distant sound of Leo laughing in the house. I realized then that true revenge isn't about hurting the person who hurt you. It is about outliving their influence. It is about building something beautiful on top of the ruins they left behind. Braden was in a cell now, surrounded by stone and iron, facing a lifetime of answering for his crimes. He was the one who was invisible now. He was the one who was forgotten. And I was 71 years old, sitting on my own porch with my family safe behind me. I was a man who had his dignity, his name, and his truth. The fire died down to gray ash. The past was gone. I stood up, brushed the soot from my hands, and walked toward the light of the house. "Come on, Maya," I said. "Let's go see what's for dinner." I closed the back door, the lock clicked, and this time it was the sound of a new beginning. Would you like me to provide the final section of the script, including the moral lesson and the closing interaction for your audience? The golden hour on Cascade Road carries a sweetness I had forgotten existed during those 8 long years in the shadows of Braden's basement. I sit here now on my new front porch, the rhythmic creak of the wicker rocking chair providing the only soundtrack to a perfect Georgia evening. In my hand is a tall glass of sweet tea, the condensation blooming like tiny diamonds on the outside of the glass. The ice cubes clink softly, a sound of absolute peace. It is not the silence of a prison anymore. It is the silence of a man who has finally finished his work. I look down at my hands. They are still the hands of a worker, scarred and worn, but they no longer tremble. The weight I carried for nearly a decade, the weight of being invisible, of being a burden, of being a ghost in my own home, has been lifted. I am Raymond Bishop, and for the first time in a very long time, I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Maya pushes open the screen door, the hinges giving a familiar, comforting protest. She isn't wearing her nurse's uniform today. She looks younger, the lines of worry around her eyes having softened since the night the blue lights filled our driveway. She sets a small plate of cornbread on the side table and sits on the steps near my feet. We don't say much. After the storm we've walked through, words are often just noise. We simply watch Leo in the yard. My grandson is running through the grass, chasing a golden retriever puppy we adopted last week. He is laughing, a deep, belly-shaking laugh that Braden never would have allowed. Braden wanted a son who was a trophy, a miniature version of his own cold ambition. But out here in the sun, Leo is just a boy. He is Lamlem Bundat. His knees are stained green and his heart is light. That, more than the millions of dollars we recovered, is my true victory. I received a call from Elias this morning. The legal wheels have finally ground to a halt. Braden was sentenced to 15 years in a federal facility, no parole, no early release for good behavior. The government doesn't take kindly to people who use their marked funds to build private empires. Julian Thorne is gone, too disbarred and facing his own 5-year stretch for conspiracy. When Elias told me the news, I didn't feel the surge of joy I thought I would. I just felt a quiet sense of closure. Justice isn't a celebration, it is the restoration of the world's natural order. Braden's biggest mistake was believing that my silence was a sign of surrender. He looked at my gray hair and my slow gait and he saw an obsolete machine. He didn't realize that I was observing him every single day. I was the one who saw the late-night phone calls. I was the one who noted the discrepancy in the bank statements he carelessly left on the counter. I was the one who knew the scent of a lie because I had spent 40 years breathing it in as an insurance appraiser. Respect is something Braden thought he could buy with a $3,000 suit or a luxury SUV. He didn't understand that respect is earned in the quiet moments when no one is watching. It is earned by keeping your word, by protecting your blood, and by having the integrity to stand for the truth, even when it costs you everything. He built a life out of stolen parts and wondered why the engine eventually exploded. I sipped my tea and watched the sun dip below the tree line, painting the sky in shades of violet and deep orange. I miss Clara. I miss her every single hour. But as I sit here, I know I kept the promise I made to her at the cemetery. I protected our daughter. I secured our grandson's future. I didn't let the rot take over the house we built together. Being the invisible man was my greatest weapon. It allowed me to move through the shadows of his life while he was too busy admiring his own reflection to notice the trap being set at his feet. I learned that you don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be the most powerful. You just have to be the one with the most patience. Maya reaches up and pats my knee. "I love this house, Daddy," she whispers. "I do too, sweetheart," I say. "It has good bones. It has a foundation that doesn't rely on someone else's pain." We often mistake silence for weakness and gray hair for incompetence. But true power isn't in loud voices or expensive suits. It's in the patience to wait for the truth to ripen. My son-in-law built his castle on the quicksand of arrogance, believing he could bury my legacy under his greed. He forgot that a tree's strength lies in its roots, not its branches. In the end, protecting your family means cutting out the rot, even if it hurts. Dignity is the only currency that never devalues, and integrity is the only inheritance worth leaving behind. I look at Leo one last time before the shadows grow too long. He catches my eye and waves his baseball glove at me. "I'll be there in a minute, son," I call out. The war is over. The house is quiet. My family is safe. I am no longer a ghost. I am a father, a grandfather, and a man who walked through the fire and came out on the other side with his soul intact. I hope my journey reminds you that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by the strength you carry within. Never let anyone convince you that you are past your prime or that your voice doesn't matter. The truth may take its time, but it always finds its way home. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have stayed silent for 8 years to protect the long game? Or would you have fought back sooner? I would love to hear your thoughts on how you protect your own family's dignity. Please let me know where you are watching this story from in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the power of the silent man, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows me to keep bringing these stories of resilience and justice to light. Turn on the notifications so you never miss a moment of our journey together. Thank you for spending this evening on the porch with me. Until next time, stay strong, keep your eyes open, and remember that the most important things in life are the ones that money can never buy. God bless you all. This is Raymond Bishop, finally at peace, signing off.